All right, another episode of No Shit. I'm your host, Matt Frazier. Saturday, October 14th. Got a really good subject tonight. We're going to talk about addiction. I notice a lot on social media and hear a lot of people talking about the topic of addiction, and seems to me like a lot of people are either running on bad information or just completely talking out their ass. So tonight, I decided to talk to somebody I felt probably has a really good understanding of the subject matter, and I'll let him explain why. So tonight my guest is Nick Furno. How you doing tonight, Nick?
I'm doing good tonight. How about you, man?
Not too bad, buddy. I really appreciate you doing this for me. If you could take some time,
No problem.
Can you kind of just explain, I guess, give us some history, who you are and where, maybe where you're at now, where you've been, with this subject of addiction, and kind of lay it out for us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I've said probably 1,000 times over the course of my life, my name's Nick, and I'm an addict. A lot of the time we think about addiction as just about drugs, but my addictive tendencies and my addiction started long before I ever did drugs at all. Starting is the pathological lying that started when I was a young child, 8 or 9, followed by video games. I was heavily addicted to video games throughout my early teenage and mid-teenage years. I got addicted to people, addicted to places, addicted to things, and then finally made that next logical step to be addicted to substances. So it's taken me way down to the bottom. My bottom's not necessarily as low as some people's is. It's higher than other people's is. But my bottom is where it was, and that's what led me to get on the road to recovery. I've been through multiple treatment centers that all follow different paths of thought into what addiction is or what substance abuse is and how to recover. I've been an active member in the rooms of AA, NA. I did some CA, some CMA, which is obviously Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Crack and Meth Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been through pretty much all of them.
Wow. So we could say you have a bit of a track record here, and if nothing else, you're an expert by experience then, yeah?
Exactly.
So
right.
You probably hear a lot of this stuff too, Nick. I mean, obviously, I discussed this with you before I asked you to come on here and do the podcast with me, but what do you think it is about addiction that people get wrong? Let's start here, okay? First of all, let's talk about what it actually is. Can you kind of elaborate on, in your experience, what actually is addiction? Like, how does it work?
Okay. Addiction is, the American Medical Association defines addiction as a neurological disorder.
Okay.
And this is really hard for a lot of people to wrap their minds around. In fact, any neurological disorder is hard for people to wrap their minds around, and here's the reason why. And we can go all the way back to the Dark Ages or early 19th century when they were first starting to learn about germ theory. And, you have these doctors coming and saying, hey, it's not demons that are causing people to get sick. It's not just bad luck. It's these little tiny bugs, pretty much, that you can't even see, but they're floating around in your blood, and that's what causes you to get sick. And the doctors, all hopped on board this train. But
yeah,
the common people...
It wasn't that long ago, right?
No,
it wasn't that long ago, right, that we were bleeding people to get their sickness out of them and things like that with leeches and stuff,
Right, exactly. So the common people didn't believe this germ theory, and it took a long time for that to really grasp in their minds. It took a couple generations. Well, the reason that addiction is so hard for people to grasp as a disease is because there is nothing to see. I mean, once you take a microscope and you show somebody the influenza virus in its most basic form, they can look and say, yep, okay, that's a thing. That's making me sick.
Sure, right.
There is no scientific test to show, hey, this is addiction. You know, here's the bug inside your brain that causes you to react differently to drugs.
Well, I mean,
and that's what. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, there is significant. I mean, maybe you can correct me here, but I've always understood that there's significant connection in your genes, genetics. That you know, addiction kind of hides itself in there because it does look like it's generational. Yeah, or am I wrong about that?
That's and I actually want to get into that a little bit more in depth later on. There is some research to say that there's a genetic factor.
Okay.
But as far as I know, they haven't locked down the specific gene. But what addiction is, and people don't really understand it. Anybody can go smoke crack. Anybody can go shoot heroin or meth or do any of these drugs. You don't have to be an addict to smoke crack. In fact, I know a lot of people that smoke crack that are not drug addicts. They can go and spend $30, $40, have a good night, and the next day they're perfectly fine.
Wow.
What separates an addict from a normal person is once I consume a drug, I can't stop. There's a little, I like to say there's a little switch in the back of your brain that when you get intoxicated enough, that switch flips and you say, hey, I'm drunk enough or I'm high enough. For an addict, it goes the exact opposite. It's once that switch gets flipped, I am not going to stop until I've spent every last penny that I have. I've guaranteedly lost my job. I've disappeared for a week. Every resource that was at my fingertips, I have used to acquire more drugs. And that's what separates an addict from a normal person. It's not what they choose to do or anything like that. It's how they react once they do it.
Well, I've heard before people say that the addiction is equivalent to like needing a breath of air or like it's that powerful is what you're saying. It becomes almost like a necessity for existence.
It is, and that we can go into right now. You have this, it's called the hedonic complex.
Okay.
And what this is it's really hard to explain just over the phone, but you have your, I guess, physical well-being baseline. And when good things happen, you know, your levels go up. You eat a cheeseburger, your levels raise a little bit. You have sex, your levels raise a lot.
Sure. Yeah.
But it all stays within normal baseline levels.
Okay.
But then you get into these intoxicating substances. And I don't usually like to consider alcohol and marijuana in with the other drugs because I think they're in a league of their own. But you have a couple of beers and you feel pretty good. You smoke a joint, you feel pretty good. Now what gets into the danger is on these higher end drugs, particularly the different forms of using them. When you do a shot of heroin, I know for a fact I will never experience a sense of physical well-being and just bliss as when I first did heroin. That is an experience that I will never get within 10% of feeling that good.
Even with heroin.
And that screwed up my, even with more heroin.
Okay.
I will never feel that high again. What happens is when we do these drugs, that hedonic complex gets thrown so far out of whack that now, rather than going on a scale of 0 to 100 and trying to be at a 50 most of the time, that heroin went up to 1,000. So now my body thinks that my baseline should be about that 500. And the best cheeseburger in the world still tastes like shit because it's nothing compared to heroin.
Wow.
And then once that addiction really takes place, and once you're in, it's called the phenomenon of craving. Alcoholics like to refer to it as. It doesn't matter if I'm robbing my grandma or losing my fiance or anything like that. That next hit is not only the most important thing, it's the only thing that matters.
I mean,
That's why you get these. Go ahead.
You have anecdotal firsthand experience with this, right? I mean, this is you're not speaking about this clinically now. You're talking about firsthand experience, correct?
Yeah, this is firsthand experience. I mean, there are countless times when I went out and I would always have the thought, I'm just going to go do $60 worth, or I'm just going to go get a gram, and once that gram's done, I'm done for the night. and maybe in a couple weeks I'll try it again. That was always my thought, which goes back to one of the things that addiction primarily affects is your memory. But what happened is I would always want to go do just $60 worth, and I would know that I had other bills to pay. I had other things to do, but once I got it in me, those other things didn't matter. There were times when I would go a week without coming home because I was constantly searching for that next hit, trying to find another way to get a little bit more. $5 here, $10 here, just hunting, craving that next little piece that'll make me feel a little bit better for right now.
That's amazing. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people understand. Well, it's hard, like you said, right? Because if you don't have that addictive quality about yourself, then there's no way you can understand someone that does, right? I mean, it's a fever that some of us are never going to get. Basically, is kind of what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. Like I am never in my life. I'm never going to feel and really truly understand what it feels like to be pregnant.
Sure.
That is a feeling that I will never be able to fully comprehend. I can read as much as I want to about how it makes women feel. I can try to talk to pregnant women and understand how they feel, but I will never really understand how a pregnant woman feels.
Sure, because you can never have that
And
experience.
that's right. Exactly. I've never had that experience, and I know I never will. And this is how most non-addicts are: is they see the outside, they see the ugliness, and they see the damage that addiction is causing. But they see why don't you just stop? It's obviously the drugs that are the problem. Why don't you just stop it? And they can't comprehend that it's not because I want to get high. It's not because I want to get high that I'm continuing to do this and continuing to do this. It's because I know if I don't, I'm going to die. Because that's what it boils down to, is when you're at that level of addiction, it becomes more important than food. It becomes more important than water. It becomes more important than love or family or relationships or anything else. If I had the choice and I was on one between eating a good meal and getting high, I would get high. If I had the choice between putting a roof over my head or getting high, I would get high. And I've made that choice many times. I mean, there were many nights that I slept in there's a mall here in Little Rock. It's the Park Plaza Mall. And I had a bed at a treatment center, but I decided to leave there because I wanted to get high. And I spent the next week actually in the parking garage of the Park Plaza Mall. There was a stairwell where nobody ever went, and it seemed like a good enough place to lay down for a little bit when I'd been up for 3 or 4 days and finally needed to get off my feet.
That's amazing. So, this concept of, well, you shouldn't have chose to do it to begin with, I hear this a lot from people too. And can you speak a little bit to that? I mean, how is it that realistic? Is it simply just a matter of, well, you shouldn't have started to begin with, those things are dangerous kind of thing? Does a person wake up in the morning and say, boy, I just can't wait to go get myself a heroin addiction? I mean, how does that kind of work?
I guess the best way to explain this is just by explaining the first time that I ever did heroin. I had just been through a really rough breakup. It'd been like a 5-year relationship, and it was over. Through the course of that relationship, I had lost almost all of my friends. And after the relationship, I just felt completely and totally alone. I met this girl that, after a couple of days, she confessed that she recreationally did heroin, is how she put it. And I remember, now that I look back, all the warning signs were there. But we went to the hotel she was living at, a warning sign, and I watched her just do a little bit. And it was such a small amount, just half the size of a pea. And I remember thinking, there's no way that can cause any sort of reaction. Now, I'm a fairly intelligent person, or at least I like to think I am. And Lancaster, the town where I grew up, has had a really bad heroin problem. I think when I first started, we were actually we had the highest percentage of heroin users in the country. But regardless of this, regardless of watching my friends go to prison, I wanted to watch Kip do a shot of heroin. I just wanted to see. I wanted to be intellectual about it and see what it was like. And I watched her do it. Afterwards, she didn't start acting crazy. She didn't start acting stupid. She was able to maintain the same intellectual conversation that we had. Only instead of this look of frustration, this perturbed look with the wrinkled brow on her face, she had a look of pure bliss. And I immediately knew I wanted to try it. I wanted to see what the fuss was about.
So,
I was an addict. Oh, go ahead.
So, I mean, when you witnessed this the first time, it was almost, I mean, that almost sounds benign. Like, I guess a lot of people think, when you think someone's using something like heroin, that it's these, burned out buildings with, guys with tattoos on their faces, and it's this kind of thing. But that actually sounds fairly benign. Like, your first experience was sort of blasé.
Right. I mean, don't get me wrong. It got to the point where I was smoking crack in abandoned buildings and crashing out in abandoned apartment buildings that had burned half down, and it got to that point. But that's not where it starts. You don't start by thinking, hey, man, I'm going to go sleep in the gutter tonight because I want to smoke some crack.
Right.
But, sorry, I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. I was an addict long before I ever put that needle in my arm.
So you already had those qualities to begin with, basically.
Right. See, we have the problem that you knew me growing up.
Yep.
You saw me play World of Warcraft. I played 70, 80 hours a week.
Sure.
Playing World of Warcraft, trying to go to high school. You saw me in my previous relationships. You saw the effect that had on me.
Yep.
And it got to the point where whatever I wanted to do that made me feel good. And that's the key thing, is that I was always looking for external stimuli to fix an internal problem.
So you're self-medicating, basically, is what you're saying. There was underlying issues that the addiction was just the result of, kind of thing.
Right, and that drug addiction, the heroin usage, the crack, the meth, those were all just different manifestations of me trying to make myself feel better. Whether I was trying to make myself feel better by logging onto World of Warcraft and being the best geared priest on the server and having people look up to me, or I was looking to make myself feel better by having a pretty girlfriend that I could be proud of, or I was looking to make myself feel better by any of these other things.
But they were all external.
Right. These are all external things because I felt bad about something inside of me.
So addiction for you, so addiction's more of a, I mean, obviously there's a physical addiction, right? Which you said we're going to talk about in a bit, but it sounds to me like it's as much an emotional thing or a feeling thing as it is a physical thing. Or am I wrong about that? Is it more?
I would say it's significantly more emotional and physical than it is.
Wow.
I'm sorry. Significantly more psychological and emotional than it is physical.
Okay.
I mean, I've gone through, there is a physical side of addiction on a lot of substances. Any sort of opiate has a physical addiction. Any sort of benzodiazepine has a physical addiction. Alcohol, there is a physical addiction.
Sure.
And when you try to wean yourself off these substances or get clean, there are physical side effects.
Withdrawals, right?
Right. There's withdrawals. There's detoxing. There's the cold sweats. Heroin withdrawals in particular is the only one that I've ever really gone through. That you feel and you are consciously aware of every single molecule in your body, and every molecule in your body feels like it's getting ready to explode. That's what heroin withdrawal feels like.
Wow.
But getting through that is the easy part. Laying in bed for 4 days, unable to really move, unable to be comfortable, not able to do anything, that's the easy part. Because the hard part, after a week, once you're done with those withdrawals and you've just undergone the most miserable experience of your life, you want to get high again. You know you shouldn't. You know it's going to be a bad idea.
Wow. So
but
that
there we go back to
so that right there tells you. I mean, to me, that's indicative of something that I don't understand. Why, when you watch what an addict goes through to recover, especially like an opiate addict, the amount that they go through to get that to get it out of their system, right? And this thought that you're going to be able to punish this person somehow into sobriety, when, like you just said, after going through all of that, even all of that pain, you still want to get high again.
Right. The best example I can think of the word nostalgia. Okay. We look back on the past kind of with rose-tinted glasses, and we like to think about the good old times, when we were younger and everything like that. Now, I remember when I was a teenager, when I consciously look back to think about it, I remember how miserable I was the vast majority of the time. But still, when I just kind of half-ass glance back into the past and I think about my teenage years, all the surface layer is the fun stuff, the stuff that I really enjoyed. And I have to really look back to see, all that ugliness that I experienced when I was a teenager. That's what addiction is like. It triggers the memory. And when I think about getting high, if I consciously think about it, I can remember sleeping in abandoned buildings. I can remember how it felt to sleep in the parking garage.
Sure.
But when I just let it pass through my mind real quick, I remember how amazing it feels to do all this shit. I remember that rush when you first stick the needle in your arm and it first hits your body. That immense flood of dopamine into the system. I remember that feeling 100 times more than I remember how bad it felt to sleep in the parking garage.
So the euphoria far outweighs any of the detrimental effects, is kind of what you're saying.
Right.
So
I can remember, because here's the best example, because it's the most widely known drug, and it's the most widely known really bad drug, I guess, is crack cocaine. This is the drug when I was going through elementary school, and they brought the DARE teachers in. It was the 90s, and they were really worried about crack cocaine. And they told us about how horrible crack cocaine was and how it kills people, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The high on crack cocaine lasts about 15 minutes. You get a really high burst, and then over the course of 15 minutes, it fades. And then for the next 4 hours, all you can think about is, where's my next hit coming from? Because you just had that big flood of dopamine, and now your body's without. And you get really high, and then you crash.
But there are some people, like you were saying back in the beginning here, there are some people, though, that, what is it? They don't feel that same euphoric high, so they don't get the crash? Is that what it is? So they don't have that need to get that next hit? Because you talked about there are people that are never going to be addicted to heroin or cocaine or any of these drugs just because they don't have addictive personalities, right? So, I mean, how do you think they experience that? That's different from a way somebody who is an addict experiences it.
Well, first of all, it's in the way that we do drugs. I've known a couple casual crack smokers. People that would do it every once in a while, and I would watch them load up their pipe, and they would put very small pieces of crack on their pipe. $2-3 rocks, and they take a hit, and they go a half hour, and then they take another hit, and after the course of 3 hours, they've smoked $30 worth of crack. Whereas I'm putting $20 to $30 worth of crack on every hit, and I'm taking a hit every 5 minutes.
So you got to do it full blast all the time.
Right. It's either I'm not doing it or I am doing it 100%. That's actually when I really looked back into my psychology and what I was doing. My philosophy with doing drugs was, I'm going to do as much as I possibly can. It's going to have either one of two outcomes. I'm either going to die, at which point I'm not going to care anymore, or I'm going to get so high that I don't care anymore. It's my goal was to find that thin red line between overdosing and dying and being really high.
So like living right on the edge.
That's what, living as close to the edge as I possibly can.
Wow.
Now, this is just me. I've known some serious drug addicts that when they watch me smoke crack, they say, "Hey, man, you need to take it slow. You need to take it easy." But somehow I was able to, when I ran out of money, when I ran out of resources, I didn't go start committing the big crimes to try to get more money. I guess that's where I was lucky. Is that when I was out of money and I'd ruined everything and everything was done, rather than give in to that self-loathing and depression and let it wash over me and just give myself to that entire life, I tried to build myself back up, which I consider myself luckier than most because of that.
How I understand it that I think I've read an article one time that they estimate that somewhere around 80% of opiate addicts start with prescription drugs. And to me, I mean, so basically it looks like this to me, and you correct me if I'm wrong. We have a society of, like you said in the beginning of this, addicts. They're there already, right? And then we turn around and we dump, for lack of a better term, like with a dump truck, like massive amounts of prescription opiates onto our society, with all of these addicts sort of already sitting out there just waiting to be discovered. But in your case, right, you're saying, though, it didn't start with prescription meds with you, right? It started with the more traditional understanding of what opiate addiction is. So where do you see prescription drugs kind of fitting into that paradigm?
Well, here's what it boils down to, and I can't stress this enough. I was an addict because I had, for lack of a better word, a hole inside my heart that I was trying to fill.
Okay.
And I think the way prescription drugs impact everything is these addicts that are out there in waiting, that haven't discovered that they're addicts yet, they have that hole in their heart. Now, it might represent itself in different ways. It might represent itself in sexual deviancies or drinking to excess or playing too many video games or whatever. But they have that hole in their heart that they're trying to fill with something. Now, when they go get their wisdom teeth removed and their doctor gives them that Vicodin prescription, and they take the Vicodin, and all of a sudden that hole in their heart feels lighter. You know, it doesn't feel as bad. They make that connection. I mean, that connection is impossible to avoid. That, hey, I took this pill and now I feel better.
Sure.
I don't feel like I'm in pain. Mentally, I feel better. I don't feel unloved. I feel this warm, fuzzy feeling deep inside my soul that I haven't felt before.
Yeah, because by definition, opiates do not fix the problem. They just make you not care about it while you sort of heal, is kind of the concept, right? Or, you know, I mean, obviously, I mean, it has battlefield uses too for people that are mortally wounded, but so that's kind of why it works. It's like, you know, okay, I'm in trauma, but I don't necessarily care about it. So it sort of gives you that wet blanket of insulation from the painful external world, right? But
exactly, whether it's a physical pain or a mental pain, it kills the pain.
But it also has an effect, right? It sort of dulls everything so that when it's not there, it's like you know, you feel everything 10 times more then because it's been dulled for so long. So it's like being in a dark room and then all of a sudden walking into a really bright room, right? Like you even though normally that light wouldn't bother your eyes, because you've been in that dark room for so long, it seems extremely bright. So I'm guessing there's sort of a reflex action to addiction for when you stop using the opiates, yeah?
There is, and that's when I was on my first go-around with heroin, which lasted about 3 months and actually was the closest I've ever been to death. I was actually legally died on the ambulance ride to the hospital. I
Wow.
remember I had been thinking, I felt bad before I started doing heroin. I had this big hole. I was sad. I was depressed. But I wasn't as depressed as I am now when I don't have heroin.
Because your baseline's lower
before,
now.
but I wasn't as depressed.
That makes sense. It goes back to that scale you were talking about, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
I was used to being, I was, the normal healthy level is to be at a 50, and I was depressed, so my average level was a 30. And that 30 was miserable.
Sure.
But once I started getting up to 1,000 every day, that 30 was 10 times more miserable than it ever was before.
Sure, by comparison, it would be, wouldn't it?
Right.
So what do you think? I mean, like we said earlier, I don't think people wake up one day and just say, "Hey, I'm gonna go get me a heroin addiction." What do you think it is? It's probably not the same thing every time that causes it, right? But does it have like a root cause? Do you think? I mean, that addiction has a root cause? Because you mentioned that. You said, look, if a person's already an addict, and then you said also has that hole in their chest or that hole in their heart. So there's got to be something there, right, on that side too. So it's not just that you have the physical addiction, correct?
Right. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that in the U.S. we are so afraid to talk about any sort of mental illness. And this is one of the reasons that you don't get as much of a problem in other first world countries. I've read a couple articles in Europe. If somebody's acting like they might have depression, even if I don't know you really well, it'd be perfectly normal for me to talk to somebody that I know on an acquaintance level and say, "Hey man, are you doing okay? Or are you talking to a therapist or anything? Do you need any help?" If somebody exhibits signs of bipolar disorder, it's considered they consider their moral obligation to talk to somebody and say, "Hey man, I think you have a mental problem and I think you need some help." Here in the U.S., we're so afraid of offending anybody that we don't do that. I mean, I had every single clinical symptom of depression when I was growing up going through school. Never one time did anybody ever mention anything to me. I mean, I just went through my entire adolescent years feeling like I was a fuck up, feeling like I was worthless. I was dog shit, and that's what I went through my entire teenage years feeling like.
That's amazing because you were what, a more than a 4.0 student? I mean,
for a long time, I was straight A every honor course that was available.
See, that's an interesting, because the thought is that addicts are fuck ups, and you're sort of not in that bucket, man. I mean, and this is a little bit about your history, but I mean, I remember you in school and writing essays in grade school at a college level and stuff.
Right, and I did, and I know. I met a guy, and I'm not going to get too much into somebody else's story.
Okay.
But
fair enough.
When I was running around doing heroin and smoking crack in Columbus, and I was hanging out with the lowest of the low, the people that you'd really watch your billfold if they were within 20 feet of you.
Okay.
I met a man named Book, and
Book?
I would Book, like book, but with an E at the end of it.
Okay.
I would be willing to say, without a doubt, that he is the most intelligent man I ever met in my life. I don't know what medical company it was, but he had gone through school, he'd gotten his law degree, and he got a biochemistry degree as well. And he was the in-house legal counsel for a medical research firm. And he was perfectly specialized for that field because he had the education to do the law side of it, and he had enough of an education about the medical side of it that he could really translate all that back and forth.
Okay.
I mean, he had it made. He'd always wanted to do this. This was his goal from the time he was 16, and this is what he wanted to do.
Okay.
And he started doing drugs. I think a lot of our childhood successes are honestly a way of getting around filling that hole in my heart. You know, I get an A, and it makes me feel a little bit better inside. And I think this might have been part of what happened to him, because he accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. And within 6 months of getting the position that he'd always dreamed of, he turned to doing crack and heroin. Because he needed something else to make him feel better. He no longer had that goal to work for.
So that's that whole concept, right? Of, because we hear about this a lot. We hear about this with like lottery winners and rock stars and all kinds of stuff. It's trying to medicate that emptiness that's internal with some sort of external means. And when you reach those pinnacles and you get there and it's still hollow, because it never really addressed the root cause, right? Or the root problem.
Exactly. Like, Duke always thought that becoming that medical lawyer would make him feel better about himself. And then he got to that point, and he realized he was still the exact same person as he was before he got that degree.
It's like that old saying, wherever you go, there...
Wherever you go, there you are.
Right.
And at that point, he started smoking crack. He started shooting heroin. He was one of those people. He was an extremely intelligent person, but I would never spend time around him because he got so focused on it that if you were laying on the ground bleeding out, or you had crack in your pocket, he would say, "Yeah, man, I'll call 911 for you here in just a minute, but I need a hit first."
Wow.
He would tunnel vision on that next hit. And that's kind of how I was. I mean, I wasn't quite that extreme. But I could easily see myself getting to that point.
So material success can almost be a pitfall in and of itself for an addict.
Oh, I'm so terrified because I'm by no means am I wealthy. But I started making pretty decent money. Not huge, but probably more than the average 27-year-old. And I mean, I came home yesterday with my paycheck, and I looked at my paycheck, and the conscious thought went through my mind, and this is as far as I am in my recovery, as well as I'm doing still, yesterday, this thought went through my mind. I looked at my paycheck, I said, man, I could go buy 2 ounces of meth, keep 1 ounce for myself, sell the other, and have twice as much money in a week.
Oh, wow. Right.
Even though I know, because I've never been able to sell drugs. Every time I ever get drugs with the intention of selling them, I use them.
Right.
I don't care what it is. If I have drugs, I use drugs. But still, that thought went through my mind, even though I know if I did this, my fiance owns this house. I don't own this house. I'd be homeless.
Right.
I mean, my boss, don't get me wrong, he's a great boss, but I show up to work tweaking, I'm not going to be having work anymore.
Sure.
Even though I can logically know if I do this, I will lose everything that I have. Still, that part of my mind wants to say, hey, Nick, go do this.
So you can't, basically you're saying you just can't unring that bell. Once that bell's rung, it's rung.
Right.
Wow. So what?
I think everybody has that point. I think anybody can be an addict. I really do. I think a lot of people are more likely to be an addict. I think it's a lot easier for some people to become an addict. But I think anybody has the potential in them to do that. And it's not about what drug you do or how much you do. I've known people that did an ounce of meth a week, which is an absolutely insane amount that would kill most people, and were perfectly fine. They went a while with hard drug use, and then they stopped, and they were okay. They never really had to worry about it again. But I think at a certain point in that drug use, because drug use not only makes you feel that you're filling the hole, it also makes the hole bigger. and everybody has a little bit of a hole in them. Even the most satisfied, happy, well-adjusted person still has something, however minor it is, that they feel they're missing.
Sure. Well, we see that, right?
Drug use will magnify that.
And we see that, right? We see that because you know, the good guy down the street that goes to church every Sunday and his kids are in Sunday school and he's a roofer and he falls off a roof and he busts his back up, and 2 years later the house is being auctioned, the kids and the wife are gone. You know, we see this. This is not something that the most unlikely of people end up, or you would think the most likely of people end up, you know, losing everything, you know, because of addiction, right?
Right.
So,
and the drug use, just getting on a little bit, will magnify whatever you feel is missing from your life. Doing drug use will magnify it. If you feel you're unattractive and you start doing a lot of drugs, then you're going to feel even more unattractive because, let's face it, drugs do damage to the body.
Yep.
If you have a psychological disorder and you self-medicate to try to get over that psychological disorder, let's face it, drugs fuck up brain chemistry.
Right.
If you have an emotional disorder and you use drugs to cope with your emotions, then when you don't have drugs, guess what? You feel again, and it's horrible. And that hole gets bigger.
Sure, it would necessarily. Right. That makes sense. It puts you in a deeper depression that you need more drugs to try to get out of.
Exactly. And then you become even more depressed because you need drugs to get out of it. That fucks with your head.
Now.
And then you enter the societal factors, because even if I fully believe that if we didn't have such a stigma around addiction, we wouldn't have as big a problem with addiction. Because when I did heroin, I remember after my overdose, when I'd spent 2 nights in the hospital in the ICU, and I'd been so afraid to call my dad that he didn't even know about it until 2 days afterwards. I had my ex-girlfriend at the time pick me up from the hospital in nothing but a hospital gown and take me to the apartment where I was living. And the next day, I drove down to Lancashire. And I didn't tell my dad what happened. I didn't want to tell my dad what happened. I told him I passed out because I had a certain type of pneumonia, which was a lie, but they said I did have aspirated pneumonia when I was in the hospital. And that's why they kept me in ICU. So it had remnants of the truth.
Sure. Yep.
But I remember he asked me if I needed help. After I finally broke down and told him why I was in the hospital, he asked me, do you need help with that? And I said no, because, A, I'm too proud to ever need help with anything. I don't need help. I just need to not do so much next time.
Sure.
And
you were lying to yourself.
I had that stigma that, you know, like, I did heroin. I was a junkie. You know, now, once I've done this, there's no coming back from this. I'm a junkie now.
Right.
And that led to even more self-loathing, which made the hole in my heart bigger, which made me want to do more drugs.
So it's a self-fulfilling cycle. Once you start it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Anecdotally, I was, I don't know, probably early 30s, and decided that I could play football again, and was quickly shown that I couldn't by having my ACL ripped off. And I went through replacement surgery, and they sent me home with prescription opiates. I'm assuming Oxycontins are opiates, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I took them, and I was in a miserable amount of pain, and I was honestly looking forward to them at the time. And within 15 minutes, I was violently ill, like projectile vomiting, violently ill. So this went on for, believe it or not, it was like a Friday or something, and I had to tolerate this the weekend. It got to the point, Nick, where I just quit taking them, because every time I took them, they just made me super sick. And I'm trying to nurse this fresh knee surgery and meniscus disc replacement and stuff that I had. And when I talked to my doctor, she kind of laughed it off. I wanted to strangle her ass, but she kind of laughed it off and the way she laughed it off was this. She said, well, some people have the right receptors, which is the majority of people, and some people don't. And you're one of those people that probably doesn't have the right receptors, so it just makes you sick. So the good news is you're never going to be a heroin addict. Now that was great, but that didn't get me through my damn surgery. You know what I mean? Like recovering from my surgery and stuff. So, I mean, how much of it do you think? I mean, do you think that's the case? That there are people that are just never going to be able to be heroin addicts or never going to be able to take it, and they're sort of like this weird genetic minority. And if that's the case, doesn't that mean that there's significant genetic factors involved in this, or am I off base here?
I think maybe genetically it's impossible for you to be a heroin addict. That might be the case. But at the same level, if you were exposed to methamphetamine, for example, you might have the capacity in you to be a horrible methamphetamine addict.
Oh, so you're saying one does not necessarily mean you're going to be addicted to the other per se.
Exactly.
So you basically you probably had then certain. Tell me if I'm wrong, but didn't you probably had like certain drugs that you gravitated towards, and some that you didn't use at all, if that's the case, yeah?
Right. I started off with heroin. I mean, that was
nothing like going in the deep end of the pool right out the gate there, buddy.
Well, I mean, I had smoked a little bit of pot when I was 14, 15, that kind of thing, but it was always really casual, and it was just a social thing. I never felt the need to get high to repress my feelings.
Well, there's a lot of argument of whether marijuana is actually addictive or not. What do you think about that? Before I want you to continue on with your thought there, but do you think that marijuana has addictive qualities, or is it
anything that releases dopamine into your brain can be addictive?
That makes sense. Yep. That makes sense.
It's not in any way, shape, or form physically addictive. But I have a good friend of mine that was the guy that actually gave me my first hit of pot. I mean, he's my age, and I don't want to knock him at all, but he's my age. He's still living with his mom, still working in the back of a restaurant, making, 20% what I make. Not that I'm any better than him. But the reason that his life has not moved forward is because he cannot go long enough without smoking pot to pass a drug test.
Right. So he's sort of stuck inside a societal stigma there, as much as anything else, though, right? Because a person that drank every day wouldn't have anything to worry about. So anyway, to that point, right? You made a very you said that anything that releases dopamine into your brain has the ability to be an addictive substance. So this kind of thought that you see a lot, that somehow marijuana is the safe drug per se, that's not entirely true. It may be safer than others, but you can't consider it safe because of that, right?
Right. I mean, that's the same as saying that alcohol is a safe drug.
Sure.
I'll be completely honest. I'm actually drinking a beer right now. I have no adverse reactions to alcohol. It's something that I have found through time. There are certain things I can handle, certain things I can't. I have no problem drinking half a beer, setting it down, and walking away.
That's interesting.
But other substances, I have a negative reaction to. That's when you get more into the heart of different fellowships of recovery. Alcoholics Anonymous, they don't care what you do as long as you don't drink. If you're taking Valium every day, you're smoking pot to, keep from drinking, that's fine. Narcotics Anonymous, if you take psychiatric medicine that your doctor provides you, they don't consider you clean. Cocaine Anonymous, CMA, they're very specific. I'm just trying not to do cocaine, or I'm just trying not to do crystal meth.
Right.
It's just different things have different reactions for different people. For me, the reaction isn't necessarily just the dopamine. It's how quickly I get that dopamine. I've done a significant amount of methamphetamine. I can't smoke the shit. because smoking meth takes a long time to get high.
So
I can't smoke pot because smoking pot takes a long time to get high. If I'm going to do drugs, I'm going to either shoot something or I'm going to smoke crack, because that is an immediate response. There's not half a second between when you do it and you start to feel it.
So
and that's what I crave when I try to get high.
So you like have no interest then? Like these other drugs could be given to put in front of you in abundance, and you wouldn't have any desire to use them at all.
It depends on what drug it is. Like, I mean, if you put a Oxycontin pill in front of me, and it was of acceptable dosage, because I'm not going to get high if I'm not going to get really high. I mean, if you put a 10 milligram Oxycontin pill in front of me, I'm going to throw that shit away. If you put a 30 milligram in front of me, then we might have a gain. You know, we might be on board there. But I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to drop it in my mouth, take a swig of water, and let it take its course.
Okay.
If you put a 30 milligram Oxycontin pill in front of me, and I decide that I want to do it, then there are a couple different ways you can do it. Either I can go down to Kmart, I can buy a bag of syringes, I can crush it up, mix it with water, pull up a shot, and shoot it. Or it's actually possible to smoke pills. Most people don't realize. I don't know how to do it. I've never done it, but I would sure as shit research and figure out how to do it immediately.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, it's not the high. It's not the drug. It's how quickly I get there. It's not about where I'm going. It's about how fast I get there.
It's about the rush.
Right. It's whether I'm getting high or whether I'm going low, whether I'm doing a hardcore stimulant or a hardcore depressant. That doesn't matter to me. I just want that immediate total change in feeling.
And that's
from feeling one way to feeling a completely different way in the span of 1 second.
It's amazing that, I mean, to relate to this, you just can't. There's no way I can find in myself a way to relate to this. I can't. You know, I don't. It's just mind numbing because, you know, when someone is so desperate for that next hit, I mean, there's no rational, logical considerations at all, right? I mean, it's just, you know, I got to go full bore, and like you said, if you're that kind of person that wants to ride that razor edge, and you did it, you were right. You know, you've done it with pretty much everything you've ever done that I know of. I mean, you know, so that's a strange combination, right? That's not only a physical addiction and an emotional addiction, but that's somebody that also likes to live life with the hammer down. And that's kind of what I want to ask you. One of the things I notice is that when a lot of people do recover from drugs, what they end up doing is they end up substituting some sort of acceptable addiction. And I put air quotes around acceptable. Like I notice, it seems like they'll become physical fitness addicts, or gym rats, or you know they'll start running, or you know, and then it just becomes about that all the time. Like they have to take that addictive quality and they just focus it on something that's less destructive, right? I mean, is that
right? And that's why a lot of recovering addicts choose the sales path, sales career, because sales provides the same highs and lows as getting high does.
It's a big rush. Yep, I'm in sales too, right? Yep.
Yeah, I know a couple of recovering addicts that one is actually considered the preeminent bodybuilder here in the state I live in. He was a hardcore drug user for a long time, and he got clean, and he realized that going and putting metal in the air didn't feel as good as putting smoke in the air, but it made him feel better. So he does that compulsively, and he does that for a living now. There are a lot of recovering addicts that choose to focus entirely on their career, whatever that career may be. I know some politicians that are recovering addicts. I know a lot of really high-end professionals that you wouldn't think of could ever have that issue. And that's the important thing. You know, we've talked a lot about where I was.
Sure.
We've talked a lot of the pain, the depression, addiction and the stereotypical addict. You know, we talked about the crackhead that steals your stereo, but we haven't talked about the person that used to be a crackhead that's now running for mayor.
Right.
The person that used to be a crackhead that's now cleaning your teeth. I mean, a lot of addicts never recover. The way Alcoholics Anonymous puts it is you either end up in jails, institutions, or death. Or you find a new way to live.
Yeah, those are your choices.
You're either going to die, you're going to be put in a hospital, you're going to be locked up, or the lucky ones find a new way to live. And you sit around the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous enough, you see the broken-hearted, the downtrodden. You see them, and then you see the lawyers, the doctors, the electricians, the business owners, the really good people that if I met you on the street right now, you would not know. There is no indication that I'm a recovering addict.
Right. It's
People
not.
look at me and they say, hey, here's this chubby salesman trying to sell me a car. They don't look and say, man, I bet that guy used to smoke crack.
Right.
Or, man, I bet that guy holed up at a Motel 6 for a week. Or anything like that.
It's funny because it seems to me that especially the opiate addiction is almost like this weird. I always viewed it as mostly a blue collar kind of issue that blue collar America likes to pretend it doesn't actually have. But kind of what you're saying is it really goes across the spectrum.
Well, what it is, and the reason that it's more of a blue collar issue now is it's an issue for people who can afford to go to the doctor. Because if I can afford to go to the doctor, that means my doctor's going to prescribe me some sort of pill. And these other drugs, the crack, the heroin, the meth, they start from people typically, I don't want to use any exclusives, but typically they affect poor people. You know, meth affects poor country people. Crack and heroin affect poor inner city people. But the opioid epidemic starts from people that, man, Johnny stubbed his toe, we better take him to urgent care. It starts from, well, I'm having really bad migraines, and the doctor prescribes me 5 milligrams of Vicodin.
Right.
The average crackhead doesn't have health insurance to start off with, and they don't have $120 to go to the urgent care and have the doctor tell them, hey, take this pill. They either get over it, or it gets worse when they go to the ER.
Sure.
And ERs tend to not prescribe any sort of opiate medication because lots of drug addicts come in seeking drugs.
I saw a statistic, and
Family,
I think it was Tennessee has more prescriptions for opiates than they have total citizens in the state. And that just shocked me. It's like, how does that even happen? You know?
I wouldn't doubt that at all. A big part of it is they're called pain management clinics. And I've known some people that frequented them. Now, the way that the DEA tracks your prescriptions isn't because they have some big network of pharmacies and every pharmacy links up and says, hey, I have a prescription for Matt Frazier for Oxycontin, and this other pharmacy says, wow, I have a prescription for him too. Maybe we should look into this.
Right.
That's not how it works.
You would
The DEA relies on insurance agencies. They rely on your insurance agency saying, hey, I paid for one prescription for Matt earlier this year at this one pharmacy, and now he's trying to claim another prescription at another pharmacy. We need to look into this. So people go to these pain management clinics, which all have one prescription from my primary care physician, one prescription from Pain Clinic A, one prescription from Pain Clinic B. So all of a sudden, I have 3 full-month prescriptions that the government doesn't know about. You know, my insurance is paying for the one from my PCP, but the other 2, I'm paying $100 out of pocket and getting $1,000 worth of pills.
It's stunning because you would think that an agency called the Drug Enforcement Agency or the Food and Drug Administration, when it knows that it's putting highly addictive substances into the general populace, would like follow this stuff at a more intimate level?
You would think so, but they're far more concerned with making sure that you sign on the proper line to go get your sinus medication because they don't want you making meth out of it.
Yeah, right.
They're far more concerned about raiding fields full of marijuana because, all those crazy marijuana heads.
Yeah, whatever.
They're concerned about the ones that are easy to convict. It is really easy to convict you of a marijuana charge. You know why it's easy to convict you of a marijuana charge?
No, what's that?
Because marijuana is completely illegal on a federal level.
Right.
So there is no excuse that you can have to say, hey, this is why I have this marijuana. There is no excuse that you can make to say, hey, this is why I have cocaine.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Totally illegal. Now, Oxycontin, the police can take it from you. I mean, if you have your Oxycontin and it's not in a bottle, technically they can charge you with it. But if you've ever had a prescription for Oxycontin, you can get out of that charge.
Sure. Yeah, I always thought it was kind of interesting because if you were like driving down the road with a bag of heroin and you got pulled over, you're going to jail, right? But if you were driving down the road with a giant prescription bottle full of Oxycontins, they'd let you go because a doctor said it was okay.
Right. I mean, there's a lady that I know that you know that if I said her name, you would know immediately who I was talking about.
Okay.
When I was in my middle teens, I was hanging out over at her and her boyfriend's house quite a bit, and she was on multiple prescriptions for multiple different drugs, or for the same drugs, rather. She got very large quantities of moderate dose opiates. She had, I think, 3 or 4 different prescriptions for 180 Percocet 10s per month. This was far more than any one person should be able to do. But she had one that her Medicaid was paying for, and then she used one prescription to pay for the other 2. She would take one prescription, just sell it, and the other 2 were paid for by the profits from that one. Then she paid her rent with whatever was left.
Wow.
I mean, but there's no enforcement of that. And all of her friends that she would buy and sell drugs with, they also had prescriptions for this stuff. So it was the most legal drug deal ever, even though it was completely and totally illegal. One girl would get into the other girl's car and hand over 50 pills, and the girl would immediately put those 50 pills into her fresh prescription bottle. So it went from the transaction itself was illegal, but neither of them were ever in illegal possession of anything.
Wow. Or chargeable, right? Because if they'd been pulled over, they both had a prescription
right.
for it.
Right. They both have a prescription for it, whereas on the other hand, I actually just went to court. I just got sentenced for possession of cocaine. I had about $5 worth of crack cocaine on me 10 months ago. $5 worth of drugs. I actually just plea bargained down because I would rather take a guaranteed small sentence than risk prison time. I got 3 years probation, which I don't know if you know anything about the probation system, but it's basically just a process of waiving away your constitutional rights. You have no Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Second Amendment rights when you're on probation.
Okay.
So, I got on 3-year probation, $1,000 fine, a lot of community service after that, because they caught me dead to rights with $5 worth of a substance.
So you're not denying you had it. You're saying I had it and they caught me.
I had it. They caught me, and I, stood in front of a judge and said, "I'm pleading guilty because I am guilty." So I'm not in any way, shape, or form arguing it. But I do think that there's something wrong with the fact that if my drug of choice had been Oxycontin, I would never have gotten that charge.
They'd have just let you go.
The amount of consequences for these dangerous drugs is so much higher than the consequences for these completely legal drugs. You know, the consequences for these legal drugs are the ones that we face, that we do to ourselves. The overdosing, the stealing from family to get more money for the drugs, the loss of loved ones, the destruction of relationships. Those are the only consequences we really have when we deal with these drugs.
So, what do you think, you know, obviously looking forward, right? Because we've sort of covered where you were, we've sort of talked about where you are, you know. What would, I mean, for someone that's you know, listening to this and really trying to understand it, let's talk about things like risk factors and things like that, right? I mean, how many people that use heroin actually overdose and die from it? Is it 80% of them? Because, you know, a lot of people would think, well, man, you use heroin once and boom, you're dead. And I'm sure that that's a possibility, obviously, but I mean, it sounds to me like because of the prescription medication system that we have, we've sort of given these people a metric or a measuring stick now with these pharmaceuticals because they're guaranteed dosage. So does that mean that as a percentage of people who are actually addicts, that do you think that the overdose rates and things like that have actually dropped because of that? Because it's not just street drugs?
Honestly, I think that the overdose rates are going to continue to rise.
Well, as a percentage of people that actually die from it, right? But here's my premise, right? I think there's a ton more people using too. Like, so I would like to know, as you know, I guess where my thought process is here is, I almost think that because it's so metered and measured now, that people are able to know, like you like to run that razor edge, right? But if you know exactly what the dosages are, you can sort of monitor that, and it makes you less likely to overdose, doesn't it?
Yes, and in a rational, logical mindset, you would think yes. But, and let me tell you, because addiction is completely irrational. And how
Sure.
I do drugs when I do drugs is completely irrational.
Sure. Yeah.
I use the weight 30 milligrams, 30 milligram Oxycontin, I mentioned earlier.
Yep.
Now, if I'm doing 30 milligram Oxycontin, I'm only going to have 30 milligram Oxycontins on me. I'm not going to keep these little piddly 5, 10 milligram pills around because they're useless to me. Because that's not going to get me where I want to go. So I'm just going to have these 30 milligram pills on me. Now, we build a tolerance, and after a week of doing 30 milligram pills, 30 milligrams isn't going to do as much for me as I want it to. So instead of doing one, I'm going to do two. Or maybe I'll be smart about it and split one in half and only do 150% of the dosage I've been doing.
Right.
You know, an intelligent, rational person from the exterior would say, well, hey, why don't you take a 30 milligram and a 5 milligram at the same time? An intelligent, rational person would think that, but an addict is not intelligent or rational in their drug use. We always want to be higher and higher and higher and higher.
Right.
And if one is good, two must be better.
So once you're sort of caught in that death spiral, for lack of a better word, like you said earlier, because as you use, the hole gets bigger, so you try to use more to fill the hole, basically. And eventually, the natural outcome, if you don't get intervention of some sort, is the addict will eventually kill themselves, because there's no way to stop.
Yeah. Because we're never going to stop until we're made to stop. Stopping is, we never, when we're in the middle of getting high and we're really enjoying stuff, say, you know, I should cut this out. I should get my life back together. No, we only stop when the consequences of our actions become more severe than the high overcome. whether it's going to jail and actually being physically made to stop, or running out of money and being made to stop, or every loved one we have won't even pick up the phone anymore.
Right.
Sometimes that'll cause people to stop. But more often than not, and I've known quite a few people, but the way they stopped was either they had an overdose or somebody they really loved had an overdose.
And it affected them emotionally more than the high.
Right, and then you get into a really tricky situation because I've known people that were with somebody when they overdosed, and their reaction was to wonder where he had his stash.
Wow.
I know you had a couple grams on you, and you're sitting here falling out on the floor. I should really be calling 911, but I want to find your dope before I do.
Well, and calling 911 is kind of not an option, isn't it? Right? Because if 911 comes here, then I'm going to get caught too.
A lot of people think that, honestly, and in some cities, it might be that way. In the majority of larger urban areas, if I call 911 and say, hey, my friend's having an overdose, the emergency medical techs are going to show up. Police don't respond to drug overdose.
They don't?
No, not usually.
Wow, I didn't know that.
On heroin, and I was terrified, thinking I was getting ready to get charged with being high. Police never showed up. They might show up if somebody dies. They might show up and question it and try to find out where those drugs came from and everything like that. But for the most part, and that's one of the few ways that our system is somewhat compassionate on it, at least from my experiences, is if somebody really needs that help and they call to try to get that help, there's not as much fear of recourse as you would think.
Well, I didn't understand it. That's interesting. But that, you're right. That's probably, I guess if the addicts know that, that's the best way to save people's lives is to not roll all heavy on them with a SWAT team. And because the next time they won't call and someone will just die. I guess that makes sense. So, I mean, we've kind of covered, obviously, it's illegal. Obviously, there's a lot of risks when the prescription runs out because, as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the heroin, the traditional heroin you think about that comes in the little balloons, is less expensive than the pharmaceutical equivalent. So is that accurate? So it kind of becomes the fertile ground for somebody if they happen to become addicted to the pharmaceuticals, that they would naturally move to that as an alternative because of cost and availability, obviously. But
it's significantly cheaper.
I've heard this, Nick, and I've heard that it's actually less. I've heard that it's less expensive than marijuana now.
It's not less expensive than marijuana, unless you're smoking the really good shit. If you're an average heroin buyer, you can buy heroin for $100 a gram. If you're somebody that has a lot of rapport with your local drug dealer, you can get heroin for $60 a gram. Now,
well, give me an equivalency here. I don't understand what's the equivalency with like pharmaceuticals? I don't know how that works out.
The best, and these are rough numbers because the danger with buying heroin is you never know how pure it's going to be. But in rough numbers, 0.1 grams of heroin is about equal to a 30 milligram Oxycontin. So when you look at it, it's going to be $30 for that 30 milligram Oxycontin.
Right.
For 10 hits, for lack of a better word, you're going to spend $300.
Right.
For 10 hits of heroin, you're going to spend between $60 and $100.
So it's significantly less expensive.
Right. It's anywhere from half to a third as much expensive.
So anybody that's already caught sort of in that spiral where they're already seeing, they've already lost their job, they've already, they've lost their health insurance, the bar to get high gets significantly lower if you use the illegal street drugs. So it's just a natural transition they're in part of the spiral, yeah.
Right. Plus, the illegal street drugs are much easier to get high on because the pharmaceutical companies do take at least some effort to trying to avoid abuse of their drugs. Whether it's they use the filler in the drug to cause it to be really difficult to draw up with a syringe, or they make a lot of gummy drugs, which are almost impossible to boil down to shoot and almost impossible to snort. They really take a lot of measures to try to make sure the only way you can take those drugs is through orally taking the pill. Whereas heroin, it is really easy to drop a little bit in the spoon, pour a little bit of water on it, apply heat, mix up, and you have a perfect shot. I mean, it's really easy to shoot heroin. It's really hard to shoot Oxycontin.
And talk to me about, I mean, obviously, how well do you think things like needle exchange programs and stuff like that work really, as far as, helping cut down on, communicable diseases and this kind of stuff? Are they a benefit for the cost of the program to society, or do you think they're a detriment and promote drug use?
I think they're a massive benefit, and so there we're going with the stigma that because it's illegal is wrong, and anything that in any way, shape, or form aids the illegal activity is wrong. Look at countries. The best example is Portugal. 15 years ago, they had one of the worst drug problems in the world. Now, they did a lot of changes with their criminal justice system as well, that I think played a big factor in this, but they started giving more needle exchanges. They made paraphernalia easier to come by. They made treatment easier to come by. They made all these things that went with drug use easier to come by. And people stopped being afraid to go to the one needle exchange in town. They stopped being afraid that there's 30 cops working around this one place that as soon as I leave, they're going to bust me for possession of paraphernalia. Because that's what happens in cities like New York and Chicago that have needle exchanges. The cops don't try to patrol the ghetto anymore. They hang out outside needle exchanges, and then when they see somebody they think has drugs, they arrest them. So Portugal started implementing more of these programs. They started giving more assistance, and it became more commonplace. And it was more commonplace, there was less stigma, there was less fear. As far as the benefits to social health, obviously, because even though I consider myself an extremely intelligent, rational individual, when I need a shot of heroin, I don't care whose needle I'm using. When I want to do dope, I'm going to do dope. I'm amazed that I don't have HIV. I am positive for hepatitis C. Luckily, I avoided getting HIV, but I shared needles quite a bit when I was in my addiction.
Wow.
Even though I knew it was wrong, even though I knew it could kill me, I would rather get high right now and risk death in a few years than not get high right now. Driving 10 minutes to the pharmacy and spending $5 on a bag of syringes, if I can find a pharmacist to sell them to me, that was out of the question. Because I want to get high right now. I don't care about 10 minutes from now. I want to get high right now, so give me your needle.
There's just an immediacy to the whole thing. It's because right. I'm already engaging in what I know is dangerous behavior. What do I give a fuck if it's a dirty needle at that point, right? I just want my fix.
Right. I mean, this shot can kill me right now. If I put 1 milligram too much or too less, if I put 5 milligrams too much, I could die from this right now. So I'm more concerned about how much I'm putting in my spoon than whose blood molecule criminals are floating around in that rig.
Sure. Yeah, it goes back to that whole premise, right? It's already an irrational behavior, and what you're expecting is,
Right.
well, you shouldn't have used a dirty needle, right? It's already illegal. This person's way past giving a shit whether it's a dirty needle or not at that point. Is kind of what you're getting at, yeah.
Right. I mean, like Little Rock is a great example because in Columbus there are a few pharmacies that will sell syringes to somebody without a prescription, but for the most part, they require a prescription for everybody. In Little Rock, there was one pharmacy that would sell syringes to somebody without a prescription. That pharmacy closed down. So now the black market for syringes has become huge. In Columbus, you could sell a diabetic person that got a monthly supply of syringes could sell a syringe for $2 each. In Little Rock, an intravenous drug user that wants to get high is going to spend $10 to $15 per syringe.
Which just, it's not like this person isn't going to get their fix, right? They're going to find a way to pay for it. Whether so that basically means that petty crime and things like that in the highly regulated and criminalized areas would necessarily be higher because of that.
Right.
So you're more likely to have violent crime and petty crime in places where you make it significantly more difficult for the junkie to get his fix and his supplies.
Here's the thing, man. Here's the best example I can think of. In the late 19-teens, some husbands beat their wives when they got drunk. Some wives beat their husbands when they got drunk. There were a lot of automobile accidents. There was a significant amount of crime that resulted from alcohol use in the early 1900s.
Sure.
I'm not going to deny that. There was crime that happened. When Prohibition took effect and it became illegal to manufacture or sell alcohol, that became illegal. It became 100 times more difficult for Johnny to get his beer. Crime went through the roof. And it wasn't just the crime of, hey, it's illegal to sell this, and you committed the crime because you sold it. It was people robbing stores because the cost of alcohol just quadrupled.
Sure.
Or octupled, or whatever. And it was people murdering each other because now that 20-cent beer is worth $1.50.
Yep.
Prohibition does not in any way, shape, or form stop something from happening. If I'm going to get high, I'm going to get high. Whether it's illegal, it's legal, I'm on probation, I'm on parole. If I know that I will go to prison tomorrow if I get high right now, if the thought gets deep enough in my brain that I want to get high, I'm going to get high and fuck the consequences. And that's the key element that we miss when we create all these policies to try to prevent this. Is it's going to happen. Is it good that it's going to happen? No. By no way, shape, or form is it good that somebody's going to go shoot heroin tonight.
It's kind of weird.
And if they're going to go,
it's a sick.
They're going to go shoot heroin tonight. I want them to do it safely.
Right, because there's always a societal cost. Period. You can't. There's always a societal cost. It's either going to be in crime and violence, or it's going to be in, like you were saying, mental health and addiction. One of those is way more violent than the other, but the societal cost is still there, right?
Right.
Now, talk to me about how much do you think addiction is physical, I guess, and how much of it is how many people do you think out there that are addicts are really just mentally ill and just need mental help?
Quite a few. Like I said, I've had my share of mental troubles in the past, and I was self-medicating for that. A lot of, they call it dual diagnosis, is people with mental disorders and addiction. I think that's a false term, in my opinion, but that's me arguing with doctors who specialize in the field.
Right.
But I've known a lot of people that had bipolar disorder or very mild schizophrenia, depression, etc., that they use drugs to make them feel better. Or they use drugs because it helps them feel more connected with the rest of the world. It helps pull them away from that separation that they felt. A lot of people look at, what percentage of mentally ill people do drugs and what percentage of drug users are mentally ill. And I think they fail to necessarily see the cause and correlation there all the time. I think drug use can cause people to become mentally ill.
Sure.
And I was actually doing a little bit of research yesterday. One of the big mental health diagnoses that people really overlook is post-traumatic stress disorder. When we think PTSD, we think of Vietnam veterans that saw some real shit. We think of people that were over in the Middle East that were feeling the bombs being dropped around them. We think of combat PTSD.
Right.
If you ask 100 people on the street, I guarantee 95 of them would say that's a disorder for veterans. Military gets that.
Right. I would agree with that.
If I wanted to, and I really didn't ever want to work again, I could go get a psychiatric diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. Very easily.
From the drug use?
Just because, from the drug use, yes. Not only from the drug use, but from some of the shit that happened while I was on drugs.
Sure.
I mean, I've been shot at. I've had a bullet land in a wall less than half an inch from me. That's more the combat side of it, but the drug use side is just the most mundane things will cause me to freak out sometimes. Whether it's, we call it triggers, whether
Sure.
it's something that triggers that reaction in me or something that really fucks with me. There are streets in Little Rock that aren't, they're not really ghetto. They're normal streets that I was on drugs really bad, and even though nothing actually happened, some stuff was going on in my mind that was so bad that if I drive on that street, I freak out.
Wow.
I mean, I will sometimes lose my shit because I saw a car that looked like a car I knew a guy that drove. I mean, just the most mundane little shit.
Well, so it's insidiously
Really fuck with me.
It's insidious because for somebody that's a veteran that comes back from being in a combat environment, those triggers will be that, or would be I would assume, and I'm not a combat vet. I am a veteran, but I'm not a combat veteran. But I would assume it would be, those kinds of sounds and smells that correlated with the events, while they were in country. But for somebody that's gone through this in their own backyard, like veterans hopefully get to come home and not have to live through those kind of stimuli anymore, although they'll still be there. But somebody that has developed PTSD from the streets still has to go participate in society at some point in the very streets that this PTSD is generated from. It's
Right.
Go ahead.
I sell cars for a living. I remember one of the worst times that I had. I sell cars, and it's not the worst neighborhood in Little Rock, but it's not a very good neighborhood. My job is get a lot of really low-income people. We do have the drug dealers and the criminal element that comes in with their bands of cash that want to buy cars, and honestly, they don't bother me. What was always my thing was because I always felt inadequate for the way that I looked or for how I was with girls when I was a teenager and everything like that. So a big thing for me when I was really bad was hanging out with women who were also really bad on drugs. and they did buy drugs and they wanted to do some stuff. Hey, great, I was happy. And I had a girl come in about 3 or 4 months ago that it was obvious that she was on some serious shit.
Okay.
And just being in the presence of somebody that a couple years ago we would have been doing a whole lot different shit. But being in the presence of her, even though I'd never met her before, I couldn't, for life me, tell you her name. I could barely even describe what she looked like. But she was similar enough to the kind of experience that I used to seek out that it really fucked with me. Now did I go flipping tables and running around or anything like that? No, that's not what post-traumatic stress disorder is. Post-traumatic stress disorder is just anything that completely heightens all of your senses and creates immense anxiety. Every single sense that I had was at high alert. I was completely in freak-out mode. I was in panic survival mode, basically. Just from this one girl walking into my dealership to buy a car.
Is there like a guilt?
That's just one small example.
Is there like a guilt component to that too, Nick? Like you feel you sort of feel that trigger, and then you're like, oh shit, man, this is like, and you like feel a panic about the way you're feeling now about the situation, right? Like
there is because I'm in a very loving, committed relationship. I'm engaged. We own a house together and everything like that.
Right.
Yet still, sometimes if a girl like that were to come across my path, my mind is going to automatically go to those dark places. And there is a guilt element that, I think, why am I thinking these things even though I have a loving fiance? Why am I such a piece of shit that I can't be happy with the wonderful woman I'm with? Why am I such an asshole that my mind still wants to go through all this shit with this girl?
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely a guilt element to that. But I can't help where my mind instinctively goes.
Sure.
What I can help is how I react to it and how I act on it.
Yeah, absolutely. You still have free choice, right? Yeah.
Right. Do I feel guilty for the way that I think sometimes? Yes. But does that mean that I act on the way that I think? No.
That kind of goes back to that whole concept, though, that if you didn't have those anchors in your life, then there would be nothing stopping you, right? There would be no guilt. There would be no... in other words, there's familial and societal sort of anchors that you have now that creates that guilt, right? Like you said, why the hell would I got this wonderful woman in my life. What the fuck is wrong with me? If that anchor wasn't there, though, that's a trip hazard, right?
That's a really bad hazard, and that's one of the reasons it took me so long when I came here to Arkansas to get the ground under my feet. Because, I was 1,000 miles away from anybody that I knew.
Sure.
If I went out and went on one, the only people that cared were the people at whatever treatment center I was staying at that point in time. They'd wonder for the next week where I disappeared to.
Yep.
The only people that really cared about me were 1,000 miles away. And at that point, he was so fed up with me that, if I disappeared for a week, he'd hope that I'd end up calling him, but he was... I think a big part of him expected every time I went more than 24 hours without calling him that I was dead.
Yeah.
He got to the point where he had to mentally prepare himself to not be devastated if something happened to me.
Or at least find some sort of enough peace with it to be able to function. So you just assume the worst and sort of move on from there, right?
Right, just assume once I stop communication that I'm dead, and if I call him again later, hey, great.
Right. So those sort of anchors, those familial anchors and those societal anchors are extremely important then for the recovery of an addict or, an addict trying to get sober. So would I be wrong in saying the worst thing we could do to that person if we really wanted to help them become a functioning, tax-paying, societal participant would be to lock them in a cage and isolate them for everybody they love and care about, or that loves and cares about them.
Definitely, because an addict needs a support system, and our judicial system likes to try to compensate and say that they're providing a support system, and to an extent they are. But our judicial system support system is completely inadequate.
Well, we're trying to handle
need to feel
we're trying to handle a medical issue as a criminal issue, right? It's a medical issue, really. Everything you're telling me is a medical issue. The criminal side of it is a byproduct of the medical issue. The violence and everything is us trying to handle a medical issue as a criminal issue, and that's kind of the problem. We're using a hammer when we need a screwdriver. Or am I wrong?
exactly. No, you're not wrong. There would not be a criminal issue if the United States government did not make it a criminal issue. All people, if everything were completely and totally legal, you can go buy crack at the corner store and nobody's going to say anything. Would there be people that robbed people for the money for it? Yes. Just like right now, I guarantee somebody within the past 10 minutes in this country has been robbed because somebody needed a drink.
Sure.
People rob people, kill people over alcohol all the time. Does it happen with as much regularity as the harder drugs? No. But alcohol is much easier to come by.
And
it is much cheaper.
Yep. And it's highly regulated. It's not like, I ask people this all the time. Who's more likely to sell a bag of dope to your kid? Some guy in an alley, or the business owner that sells it as part of his business license? And a pharmacist is not going to sell drugs to your kid. It's not going to happen. They're not going to risk going out of business for it. But some dude selling smack in an alley doesn't care. He just wants his money.
Right, he wants his money because he's got his own habit that he needs to fix.
Most of the time, right? I mean, does the drug dealer that doesn't use actually exist? Do you think? Is that a myth?
I've met a couple of them. From my experience, they don't necessarily use drugs, but I've never met one that was a well-adjusted, happy human being. I've known. I knew a guy in Columbus that his name was Goody. He had a daughter named Goodness. And I met his entire family. I met all 5 of his baby mamas. I spent time at his house. I saw, because I drove this guy around all the time, I saw how much money he was making. Yet, despite that, there was always something that had to take up his money. Even though this guy was making $1,000 to $2,000 every single day of the week, and he was turning $500 profit into $1,500 to $2,000. He's profiting at least $1,000 every single day of the week. He was constantly broke. He was constantly scraping for 10s and 20s.
Weird.
So do they exist? Yes, but
they're not well-adjusted people.
They have that hole just as much as I do. They just, instead of filling that hole with the drug use, they fill that hole with the money that comes with selling the drugs.
Oh, that's interesting. I never considered that. So your premise is that they're addicted to the money or the excitement of it, the danger of it, but they're addicts too.
You go into any rehab center in the country right now, I guarantee you there is at least one person that will share in group, I was never addicted to drugs, I was addicted to the money, or I was addicted to the lifestyle.
Wow.
It's chaotic. It's fun. It's thrilling and dangerous and adrenaline pumping, and it can be a really really great lifestyle for a while, but it's not sustainable.
Well, no.
I mean, think about going to a club, a nightclub with the bass booming and pretty girls dancing and lights flashing and all that shit happening and going on. For an hour or two, that's really fun. You watch everything happen. You have a few drinks. You really get in the mood to have a good time.
Right.
But do you think the bartenders that deal with that night after night, or the security guards that have to deal with that, really enjoy it after a while?
No, I would imagine it get old pretty quick. Yeah.
Do you think they go and say, man, I'm going to have such a great time at work tonight? No, because they start to see the ugliness. When you're a bystander just passing through something, you see the pretty lights. You see all the flash of it. You see what's good about it. Once you spend a little bit of time in it, you start to see the bad, and then you can only see the bad, and then you completely stop seeing the good, and it just becomes all shit.
Yep. Yeah, it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable. So, all right. So let's talk about treatment, right? On the opposite end of this, let's say that tomorrow. In my opinion, our government came to its senses and we started handling these issues with treatment and things like that. Do you think that, well, obviously there's countries that have already done this, right? We've seen the results. Like you said, there's countries like Portugal and stuff like that have seen ridiculous drops in the death rate and the addiction rates and things like that in hardcore drugs like opiates. I mean, but right now in America, let's say that, that happened. I mean, how much of a reversal and how fast of a reversal do you think we would see in the rate of people using drugs and death rates and things like that?
Honestly, and I hate to seem so cynical about it, even if our government locked on and found the absolute perfect model on how to respond to drug addiction,
right?
I think it would take us a couple generations to really see results.
It's that bad.
Because it's not just that the drug addiction is that bad. It's that the stigma around it is so bad. Even in Portugal, when they had all these really bad drug problems, so they were more forward thinking. The people, just the common person, was more understanding of the fact that this is a disease. This isn't a moral failing. That this is some real thing inside this person's head that's causing this, and I want to help.
Right.
That's just the European mindset that helps forward Portugal's movement. Here, even though my fiance is wonderful and very understanding of my personal addiction, even she still has a big problem with it. That's illegal, so they need to be punished.
Right.
There's still, even from the people that really know and truly love and care about addicts, they still think there needs to be some sort of punishment.
Where does that come from, right? Because I see this, right? I see the natural reaction of people, normal everyday people, and their first gut reaction is either anger or violence. Like there's no consideration whatsoever that this is a person that's struggling with something. It's just lock them up, throw away the key. That's like the answer. Where does that come from? Why is it like that?
It's because and it goes to our judicial system. Our judicial system is not based around justice. It's based around the Hammurabi Code. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth.
Right.
You did something that we said is bad, so you need to feel bad because of it. We don't look at, gee, why did you do this bad thing? How can I keep you from helping to do this bad thing again? Our model for treating any sort of crime is punish. I'm going to lock you in prison. I'm going to strip away your constitutional rights. I'm going to let the entire world know that you did this. Like, even though it's a completely different subject, sex offenders. Oh, you were 19 and you had sex with your 17-year-old girlfriend, and you got caught. Anytime you move, now you have to go door to door and let them know you're on a list. In the name of protection and safety, we have gotten rid of that. These are people. This isn't somebody that was, this isn't just a crackhead. This is somebody's son. This is somebody's daughter. This is somebody that feels bad about a lot of the other shit that they've done. I deal with enough shit from my past that I'm still trying to cope with that I really didn't need to be put on probation. I punish myself mentally enough already. I'm not going to argue my sentence. I punish myself more every day than the state of Arkansas ever could.
Right.
But still, we feel that the state of Arkansas it's the fact that we think the government is supreme. We think the government knows best. We could talk the philosophy of this for a long time.
Sure.
It goes back to like when our country was founded. The philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment were discussing the nature of man. Is man naturally good and society causes him to be evil? Is man naturally evil and society forces him to be good? And when our country was first founded, we were founded on that belief that, man is a blank slate, and the environment that he's in will cause him to become who he is to become. But we've lost sight of that, and we've gone to that philosophy that unless the government is here to protect me, all these people are going to hurt me. And we are so afraid of, Johnny Crackhead coming in and stealing our Xbox, or something happening, or losing a little bit, that we're willing to sacrifice somebody else's rights in the name of that security. I'm more comfortable, and this is me. This is me personally. And obviously, my feelings on the subject.
Yeah.
I am more comfortable knowing that there are a lot of crackheads in prison than in a rehab that they can walk out of. The fact that there are a lot of people in prison still brings me comfort, even though I logically know that it's wrong. The fact that when I see a story about somebody getting busted for 25 pounds of meth and going to prison for the next 40 years, even though I know that they were probably just an addict and they got caught up in a bunch of shit, even though I know that they still might be a good person, I still feel more comfortable knowing, hey, there's 25 pounds of meth off the street.
So it makes you feel better, even though I guess what you're saying, though, is logically, though, you believe that it doesn't actually help the problem, but it still makes you feel better about it.
It feels better even though I know it's wrong.
So that's the reason why. You're saying that's it. It's for whatever reason, people can find some sort of comfort in it.
Right, because here's the thing, and let's just take Johnny Crackhead, for example. Now, Johnny Crackhead has done some bad stuff. And he's stolen people's stereos out of their cars. He's mugged a couple little old ladies. He's not a really good person. He's done a lot of stuff that makes it seem like he's not a really good person. In fact, at some points in his life, he's been a really bad person. Now, Johnny Crackhead gets busted with some crack. And he goes in front of the judge. And the judge has the choice, Do I want to make sure, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that Johnny Crackhead can't mug any little old ladies for the next 5 years? Or do I want to actually give Johnny Crackhead a chance? Do I want to let him try to be a better person? In the long run, giving Johnny Crackhead that chance is going to be the better option. Because it might take him a couple years. It might take him a few tries. But if he really wants to, Johnny Crackhead will be able to recover and live a good, honest, productive life. But then again, there's that little lady that might get robbed if he just goes to rehab.
Right.
If he goes to prison, then when he gets out of prison, he's not going to have any chance at all to succeed after prison. So he's probably going to wind up back in prison. And at this point, Johnny Crackhead's made a lot of mistakes, and he's going to spend the vast majority of the rest of his life behind bars because of it.
And that's
Is
just
it
that.
the right decision? No. Is it the safer decision? Yes. I mean, it's safety versus right and wrong. Is what it is.
Well, you can't even keep hard drugs out of prisons. I mean, so in a free society, you know what I mean? Like, how far does this go?
Well, I mean, that's the prison. I'm trying to think of
Because it's
there's a phrase from a clockwork. Concentrated criminality is all a prison is. Obviously, the convicts are criminals. Prison guards are like 7 times more likely to be felons than any other profession in the United States.
wow. I mean, where's that come from? That statistic, where does that come from?
I don't remember if it's either 6 or 7. I honestly don't remember the source. I'll try to find it for you later.
That's okay. I just didn't know if you could cite it.
Outrageously more likely to be felons. Consequently, police are also significantly more likely to be felons than the average citizen, but to a lesser degree. But prisons take this criminal element and all the ugliness and seediness that goes with it, and try to put it all in a box. And at that point, it's not about making sure that these people stop being criminals. It's about just keeping them away from the rest of the people.
And that's it.
Our prison system is not in any way, shape, or form about reform. The few prison systems in our country which have instituted policies of reform have seen amazing results. One of the few things I actually really like about Rick Perry of Texas is that he was given the opportunity to build, I think it was 10 more prisons. And he said no. Instead, let's take the money for those 10 prisons and put some sort of rehabilitation program in every one of the prisons we have. His recidivism rate dropped by a significant amount. I don't have the figures directly in front of me, so I don't want to start off any false data.
Sure.
But instead of building more prisons, he decided to make the prisons he had more about reform than punishment, and crime dropped.
It's a weird concept, right? You would think that if you would think, and this is just me, that if the point of prisons and criminalization was to prevent people from doing it, isn't it weird that we're just building more and more of them? So it's almost like they don't work at all for their intended purpose, which you would think would be, hey, look, we got a bunch of jails, and if you screw up, you're going to get thrown in one. They're all full, and we keep building more of them. So it kind of like doesn't work, you know? I mean, as a solution, it doesn't appear to affect the problem in any way, shape, or form to me. But that's just me.
It really doesn't. And here's in the U.S., we have these funky things that international listeners might not know, but the speed limit. Driving down the road, they have a sign that says how fast you can go. I know I personally, and tell me if you disagree with this, I get a feel, regardless of the speed limit, for how fast is safe on that road.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't necessarily pay as much attention to the speed limit as I pay to making sure that I'm driving safely. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
I mean, and this causes me sometimes to drive at a higher speed than I'm legally allowed to.
Right.
Now, I'm breaking the law when I do this.
But who doesn't?
So, right, exactly. But here's the thing, that same concept can be applied to any law there is. You know, if I'm going to speed, I'm going to speed. I'm going to drive 50 miles an hour, whether the speed limit's 50 miles an hour or 35. I'm going to smoke crack, whether crack is legal or illegal.
Oh,
It's something that I want to do.
right.
If I'm going to smoke crack, the fact that it's illegal isn't going to stop me. The fact that heroin is illegal is not going to stop me from doing heroin.
Right.
I'll even take it a step further, and the fact that robbing a bank is illegal is not going to stop me from robbing a bank.
It's that concept that,
It's just the fact that
locks keep honest people honest, right? They don't, you know, I see, based on our exploding prison population in this country alone, I see very little evidence to support the fact that making things illegal stops people from doing them.
No, making things illegal doesn't stop people from doing things. It just creates criminals.
Right. Now that's to say, so people that object to that kind of idea, the first thing, well, you just want to be an anarchist and you want everything to be legal. And I'm like, no, see, that's not what that means at all. It just says, look, you're not going to solve problems by creating more laws. I'm not saying laws shouldn't exist. It should be illegal to kill somebody. It should be illegal to harm somebody. It should be illegal to take people's shit, take their stuff. All of those things should be illegal, yes. But what I'm saying is I don't see any evidence that laws actually fix problems. I haven't seen that. It just transfers the problem to something else. We take a drug problem and we turn it into a massive population of people in cages that is sucking the society dry with all of this taxes and all these expenses that has to go into supporting this massive industrial prison complex. That's what I'm getting at. I'm not saying there shouldn't be bad people in prisons. I'm saying that I don't see any evidence that that law's necessarily the only way to fix problems or even the best way to fix problems. Does that make sense?
Right, and I think a lot of it has to do with, and I kind of touched on it earlier. Okay, now somebody that smokes crack is more likely to rob a liquor store.
Because they're irrational.
You agree with that?
Yeah, because they're irrational.
Right.
Yeah, we covered that. Right. Yeah.
And now somebody that smokes crack is more likely to kill somebody.
Sure.
Because they're irrational.
Right.
So what they've done is they've said, now this crackhead is more likely to have burglary or murder. So I'm just going to arrest him for possession of crack. I'm going to put him in a cage for possession of crack. I'm assuming that since he smokes crack, sometime in the future he would have robbed a liquor store and killed somebody.
Right.
So I'm preventing this future crime from happening by incarcerating them on this just legislative offense. Because that's all drug laws are. There's nothing intrinsically wrong about drugs. There's nothing more, it's actually really morally wrong about drugs. Now, they might cause people to do things that are morally wrong. But the actual act of getting high is not in any way, shape, or form morally objectionable. But this crackhead's more likely to rob a liquor store. He's more likely to rape somebody. He's more likely to kill somebody. So I'm going to arrest him and put him in a cage because that might have happened at some point in time, and I want to keep it from happening.
So it's like pre-crime, in a sense.
Right. It's like Minority Report almost, but in the real world.
Well, we know that there doesn't seem to be any dollar amount for enforcement of drug laws that you can throw at it that actually reduces the amount of drugs available, right? So that's, to me, that's like cause and effect. If because I'm a process engineer, right? I build machines and things like that. If I keep affecting a change in a system that I'm trying to fix and I don't see a desirable result, I have yet to see where doing more of the same shit that's not working actually fixes the problem. You know what I mean? Now, maybe that's just me being logical, but this seems to be the case here, that we continue to throw more of the same solution that's already not working at the problem, and then all of us are standing around dumbfounded when it doesn't work.
You know, and that's something that you hear a lot when you enter the rooms of AA and NA. They start quoting Albert Einstein at you. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Okay, right, yep.
And that's what we've been doing. We've been doing this since even before history was really a thing. Go back to ancient China. I mean, pre-BC, like in BC times, China had a major problem with opium. For thousands of years, they've been fighting the opium trade.
Yeah, but you talk to people, the people will say, well, how they fixed that, they just took all the opium users and lined them up and shot them. I mean, I've literally heard this before, like that they think that that's what solved the problem, right?
Right.
It just,
and that might solve the problem for a couple years.
Well, the fact of the matter is, Nick, is every year they had to line people up and shoot them. Like it never stopped having to shoot people. they just kept doing it. So it's not like it's not like the problem went away. It's still there. They just ended up shooting less people every year. That was all it was.
Not only that, but the problem actually got worse because now there were people that used opium and they got arrested. Now you just killed Jin Soon, and 10 years later, Jin Soon's little daughter that just grew up without a daddy now has so many emotional issues that she starts doing opium as well. In fact, Jin Soon's entire family, to cope with all the shit that went with Jin Soon being dead, the entire family has turned to opium to try to get off of it. And that's what happens in our inner cities. Because you have all these black men getting arrested for crack and heroin and going to prison. And now you have an entire generation of black youth that have grown up with only one parent or living with their grandparents and stuff like that.
It's like the they call it the poverty to prison cycle or something like that now.
Right. And again, I don't have the exact number, but the chances of a child without a father ending up in prison are significantly higher than the chances of a child that had both parents. The chances of a child without a mother ending up in prison aren't as much higher, but they're still higher. The chances of a child that only grew up with his grandparents going to prison is significantly higher. You take these people's family away and then expect them to still be completely well-adjusted human beings.
I see that, right? I see that. I don't understand why. Because I watch it. We arrest people. We book them, and then we put them at home and we stick a bracelet on their leg, and then they plead out, which means they're never going to be able to get a job. And then it's just like rinse, repeat. And my question was, why do we even bother? We should just stick these people like straight on welfare, because guess what? That's where they're headed. And just skip the whole expensive getting them a legal counsel. That would be unconstitutional. I understand that. But doesn't it? It's almost silly because it's so predictable. Once you've stuck someone in this cycle, in the poverty to prison cycle, once you've stuck somebody in this cycle, they're sort of stuck in it. There's no getting out of that. There's no amount of community service. I don't think, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but there's like no amount of community service these people can do. There's nothing they can do to ever get that mark off their record. And because of that, McDonald's won't even hire you. So what are they supposed to do now? Yeah, they're not in prison anymore. Great. They're, we've taken them where we were feeding them 3 times a day and giving them clothing and shelter, and we throw them out onto the street and we say, now go be a good person and don't be bad anymore. But there's absolutely no method for which they can prosper. So it kind of just kicks them right back into that either crime or becoming dependent upon the system, right? I mean, there's very little opportunities for someone that has a drugs conviction. Or am I wrong about that?
There's almost no. You're not wrong. Our prison system is set up to cause failure, and like you mentioned the welfare and things like that. You also have to consider states like Arkansas that any sort of drug conviction completely bans you from ever receiving any sort of public assistance.
So in that case, they're literally saying, you either find the 1 in a million job, or I'm guessing, or whatever. I don't think there's a lot of corporations and companies out there that will hire someone with a drugs conviction. So you're basically telling them, get out of our box, and if you're going to stay in Arkansas, go commit crime.
Basically, like that's how it is. Our prison system sets people up for failure, and I'm lucky enough that I'm in one of the few careers that it's more about performance than background. But a lot of people that I know,
because obviously you found gainful employment, right? You're producing, you're paying taxes, you're participating in society, and any societal costs that you've incurred, you're sort of paying off now by being a productive member of society, right? So obviously there's opportunities for employment. I mean, how bad is it though?
It's that I have friends of mine, because I work in the car business, and we get a lot of cars sometimes back in our shop, and we need to hire some extra help. I have friends that are mechanics that are fully certified, can go to any service center in the country and get a job, except for the fact they have that conviction.
Right.
For people with that criminal background, $10 to $11 an hour is considered fantastic money. If I were in the position of somebody like my fiance, who's in a professional career that requires a clean background, if she had gotten some sort of drug conviction, her life would be essentially over at that point. And there is no recourse. Some states offer different plans. I think Arkansas is called the 531 plan, that if it's your first offense, you can get it sealed from your record after all the terms of it are met. And a lot of states will allow you to expunge your record after a certain amount of time, but still, that's, a 5-year prison sentence is going to be on your record for at least 15 years. So if you get convicted of something at the age of 18, you're going to hear about it until you're in your 30s. It's going to hold you back until you're in your 30s. And even then, employers are going to look at you and say, you've been working at Taco Bell for the past 5 years. Why should I hire you to do this?
Right.
You've been making minimum wage for your entire life. Why do you all of a sudden deserve $30,000, $40,000 a year?
Right.
It's a continual cycle of poverty.
And there's just no way out of it. Right. Yeah, absolutely. There's a direct correlation between poverty and crime. I mean, I don't think anybody can argue that there's not. That there just is. Right. That's why it's called the poverty to prison cycle, because it's true. It exists. Okay, so when it comes to treatment, I mean, obviously that something like treatment is going to be very, different treatment's going to work for different people, right? It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all kind of solution. It won't work that way. In your experience, do you think that there's some forms of treatment that are better than others? Some forms that should just be avoided altogether because they're worthless? I mean, like, where do you come down on that side of the fence?
There's so many different ideas of what treatment is. I'm sure you've seen the commercials for the ass hat out in Malibu that has
yeah.
I can't name the treatment center, but I was an addict, but now I'm not. that kind of thing.
The infomercial treatment. Yep.
Right, the infomercial treatment that, most insurance is accepted. If you don't have insurance, it's okay. It's only $15,000. We're sure mommy and daddy will loan you the money. That kind of thing. That kind of treatment is becoming very popular right now, simply based on the fact that it's so comfortable. Who wouldn't want to go out to Malibu and lay and relax in the sun and get massages? But that doesn't work. Maybe for some people it does. I can only speak for myself. My time in treatment centers was pretty uncomfortable. I don't think that the lockdown intensive treatment centers really work. I was in one of those for about 6 months.
Well, walk us through that, Nick. Talk us through sort of your history, if you don't mind. If you wouldn't mind recapping this, just talk us through your what was your path through treatment? Because I hear this all the time. There's this concept that you should just let people die, which I just don't even get. But okay, whatever. But they'll go. Some people will go to treatment once and they're fine. Fine is a relative word here, right? But some people it takes multiple times, right? So kind of walk us through your history with that.
Because I got arrested here in Little Rock, I had decided to move cross country and get my life back together, and made it to Little Rock and decided to get high one last time. But I got arrested and I went to a treatment center here that they consider themselves a behavior modification center. Is how they advertise themselves.
Okay.
This is the kind of place that for the first 30 days, you weren't even allowed to talk to somebody that didn't have their privileges, is what they call it. You're not allowed to call anybody on the phone. You basically wake up at 6 a.m., you make your bed, you eat breakfast, and you read the morning meditation, and they operated a car wash. And basically you were locked down, and between 9 and 5 every day, you washed cars. You had a little bit of group here and there. Then every Monday, they had behavior modification group. And there were all kinds of little rules that went with this place. They wanted to really make you focus on paying attention to your actions. So Monday night, they would get everybody in the room, and if anybody saw you break a rule at any point throughout the week, they would stand up and say, "Hey, Nick, you broke this rule." And you'd have to go sit on the bench in the middle of the room, and everybody would tell you why that rule is so important and that kind of thing. After 30 days, you'd be allowed to get a job and make a little bit of money, so you could pay your rent there, of course. That didn't work for me. There was no risk in a place like that. You're all nothing. You can't get high if there's no chance of getting drugs, and you can't recover if there's no chance of getting high. In my personal opinion, after 3 months, I got put on a path. We were allowed to leave for a little bit, but I didn't have any friends or family here in Arkansas, so the only thing I knew to do when I went on a path was go get high.
It's kind of that's just sort of that's isolationism, right? And yeah, sure. I mean, if you could wave a magic wand and remove all opiates from the planet, everybody would have no choice but to get off of them. Okay, but that's not the way the real world actually works, unfortunately. And sooner or later, you're going to have to either you're going to have to go out and have to deal with it. And in an isolated environment, that's what I guess what you're saying is that's much easier. So you're not really recovering.
Right.
You're just abstaining because you don't have any other choice.
Exactly. It's not recovery, it's forced abstinence.
And that's the same thing. That's what prisons do. But if that worked, then everybody who went to prison when they came out, they wouldn't use drugs again. But that's not what happens.
Right. So I did that for 3 months, and I went out and got high, and then I decided to give the same place another try. And I went another 3 or 4 months, and I went out and got high. So I decided it was time for a change. I went to a different treatment center that was owned by a good friend of the guy that owned the one I'd just been at. And it was pretty much the same thing with a different name. Um, I did learn things from all these places. As strange as it sounds, I make my bed every morning because of places like this. Most people don't care about that shit. I never cared about it before, but it's something now that I latch onto. So I'm not going to say that I didn't leave these places without growing a little bit as a person, but they didn't give me the kind of growth that I needed.
So so you're talking about this. So when you went to the second place, you did the first place twice, and then you went. So you're up to 3 different treatment centers now, right? At this point.
I'm at 3 treatments at this point. Yes.
Okay.
So I leave the second place, and I go out and get high. I went to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and somebody at the NA meeting took me to a detox center, which I didn't really need because I hadn't been doing any physically addictive substances, but I went there and they recommended another treatment center to me. So now I'm at 4, and they just sent me to treatment center 5.
Wow.
Treatment center 5 is actually the state-sponsored treatment center. It's the Recovery Centers of Arkansas. And the first 2 treatment centers weren't good quality. They were owned by individuals that at least tried to take care of the building. The state-funded center, funding was so low that the only reason this place ever passed health inspections was because it was a government agency. The plumbing in the place was abysmal. We had, obviously, the big group bathrooms and showers, and the rule was you weren't allowed to go to the bathroom if somebody was taking a shower, because if somebody flushed the toilet while you were in the shower, sewage is going to come pumping out of the floor of the shower.
Oh, wow.
I mean, literally, the kind of conditions that you would expect in a near third world country were the living conditions of this place. There were bed bug infestations, horrible, terrible living conditions. I did that for 30 days and then graduated that program and went to the state-funded, they call it intensive outpatient.
So it's still, you're still at 5 at that point, right? That's not another.
Right. Well, it's technically a different center. It's still the Recovery Centers of Arkansas, but it's a different program. Rather than being locked down and having to stay there for 30 days, now it's chemical-free living. And basically, I get a room and a bed, and instead of having 10 roommates, I have 1 roommate, and I'm allowed to go do life between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m.
Okay.
I'm allowed to go get a job. I have to pay rent. I have responsibilities, but life is somewhat normal again at this point. And I did what I do. I decided, hey, I'm going to try to get over my addiction by focusing wholeheartedly on something else. And I decided at that point I was going to focus wholeheartedly on my work. I got a job waiting tables, and rather than sit around at a rehab center all day, I decided that I was going to work as many hours as humanly possible. And at the restaurant I was working at, I started doing 6 or 7 doubles every week. Basically, I'd get there at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'd leave at 10 o'clock at night. And I was making $800 or $900 a week.
Sure.
And after a few weeks of this, I got burnt out and needed a little bit of energy. And my roommate at the time said, hey, so at this point, I've never done methamphetamine. And my roommate asked, hey, Nick, you've never done meth, right? And I said, yeah. Well, I have a little bit if you want to try it. And at that point in time, it was on.
And this is in an addiction center. Like, this is in a rehab center, right?
Right.
Wow.
I mean, you have to think a lot of people in these centers are court-ordered to be there. And they don't want to be there. They don't want to change. And the fact that they're there really hinders the progress of the people that want to change. Can I say that I would never have gone back out if he hadn't offered me that hit that night? No. But that thought hadn't been on my mind, and he offered it to me. And I don't blame him at all. He's got his demons, he's got his problems. But that caused me to spiral out of control yet again. This is what led to me living in the Park Plaza parking garage for a couple of days. And I went about 2 weeks where, luckily, I had a gym membership, so I was able to go into the gym to shower when I remember to. And I went probably 2 weeks, and I'd say in that 2 week period I ate less than 5,000 calories total.
Wow.
Just because when you're on these heavy stimulants, you can't really eat. I lost probably 20 pounds in 2 weeks.
So that one, and that's all it took was that one taste of meth, and you were on a 2 week bender for meth.
I was on a 2 week bender. I had probably $4,000 saved up at that point in time. 2 weeks, $4,000 gone.
So you, if you had more money, you would have kept going. You ran out of money.
Oh, definitely. I didn't stop because I wanted to stop. I stopped because it was winter and I suddenly got sober and realized it was cold.
So that was addiction center number 5 that your roommate gave you meth for the first time. So then what happens after that? You're sleeping in the parking garage, and then what happens?
So then a guy that I knew that I'd been at my first treatment center with messaged me, and he was not doing the right kind of stuff, but he was living at a homeless shelter / treatment center, and he gave me a ride there. So I went and I moved in there. This is now number 6, and I stayed there for a couple months. Honestly, I never really got clean there. They just didn't care.
So it's more like a halfway house.
It wasn't really a halfway house. They had really strict times where you had to be there, times when you had to leave, that kind of thing. You couldn't be there between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., but you couldn't be later than 6 p.m. But they received funding for everybody that was there. So they'd rather just keep people there even though they're fucking up.
So it was just a business.
Right, exactly. They never kicked me out, but it got to the point where I got high enough that I went a couple days without showing back up, and then they had to kick me out. And that started another bender. I ended up holding up at a Motel 6 with the guy that had given me a ride there and one of his friends, and we were all just, we weren't sleeping because we were all messed. But, 3 people just spending their entire time in one little hotel room trying to figure out how to get the next hit. Basically is what it turned out to be.
Wow.
And then I was there for probably 2 weeks. And then ran out of money. They bailed because they had money and didn't want to pay for me to get high anymore. And then a guy from NA let me crash at his place for a few days. I've moved into a chem-free house run by a guy from NA, so now we're on number 7. This is very unstructured. Just, the guy said, as long as he knew I was active in Narcotics Anonymous and I wasn't getting high, I could stay there for a certain amount per month. I got another job, actually signed up for school, because that's what I decided I was going to devote myself to this time. And I was working full-time, going to school full-time, and I did really good for 3 or 4 months. And then, I had gone 3 months without a single day off, and it just lined up that I had 4 days off in a row and $1,000 extra, and we're off to the races again. It's always been a combination of time plus money equals relapse.
Yeah.
For me.
So it's for you. It's not necessarily. It's not like my dog died or my girlfriend left me, or it was just I've got the time and the money, time to party, kind of thing.
Exactly. I've got a couple days where I don't have anything to do, and I've got the money that I can blow if I have to. I mean, it's never been a really emotional thing for me. It's just it's a matter of convenience. It's like you're a lot more likely to drink a soda if you have a soda in the fridge.
Right.
So I went on another bender, relapsed again. It didn't last as long, but it was honestly probably worse. And I broke the rules a little bit. I went back to Recovery Centers of Arkansas. I was supposed to go back through their inpatient, the 30 days with the plumbing that would seep up under your feet.
Yep.
I knew the director, and I talked to her, and I told her my story. I was like, hey, look, I can't pass a drug test right now, but you know that I know everything they're going to tell me in Riverbend. And she let me come into Williamsburg.
So now we're up to, so that would be number 7 or 8?
This will be number 8. And then I went to number 8, and I actually did a pretty good job. For the first time, I really tried to work the program in Narcotics Anonymous. I got a sponsor. I worked the steps. And I think what really killed me on the concept of NA, because they always tell you in Narcotics Anonymous that as long as you're honestly working the program as hard as you can, and you're being complete and thorough about it, you won't relapse. It's the only promise that Narcotics Anonymous ever makes to you. And I was completely dedicated to it. It was 100% what I was doing. I was spending an hour to an hour and a half on step work every night. I made sure to moderate how much I was working to not overtax myself. But about 4 months went by, and I ended up relapsing right before I was supposed to move in with a couple guys from NA. And I moved in with them. It was just one small one, a minor one, but it was enough to really cause me to be disheartened with NA. And I moved in with them, and I lived there for 4 or 5 months. And this wasn't a treatment center at all. This was just a place to stay.
Yep.
I met my fiance while I was living there. About a month and a half or so after I met her, I relapsed again, and after that relapse is when the people from NA didn't want to give me any more chances. Knew I didn't want to go to rehab again because I wanted to be able to see my girlfriend at the time whenever I wanted to. So I decided it was time to get my own place and actually be an adult. I've made mistakes since then. I've gotten high since then. I've done shit that I know I shouldn't have done since then. But for the first time when I was in my own apartment, now I had something that I would actually lose. Now the consequences became real. Now it became, if I get high and I lose my job, I lose my apartment. If I get high and I lose my job, I'm not going to be able to take my cat with me to any rehab center. I'll lose this couch that I got a great deal on at Goodwill. I'll actually lose stuff. And, I think that in itself has helped quite a bit.
So it's a perspective thing now for you, right? You've seen the other side. You know what you know what the other side. You could give tours of the other side, but you see that contrast now with what you have versus, so you're saying that's the difference now for you, right? Is you have that comparison.
Right, and honestly, sometimes sometimes it hurts things, and it doesn't make any logical sense. But that's like, I don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow, but I'm going to go to bed here in a couple hours. I'm going to sleep in tomorrow because Sunday's my only day off. I'm probably going to want to go to IHOP for breakfast because I'd like to go to IHOP on Sundays for breakfast. We're going to go grocery shopping. We're probably going to watch some TV, relax, do a little bit of fun stuff. I don't necessarily know what yet, but I'm fairly confident that I know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Okay.
And there's a part of me that doesn't like that. There's a part of me that's still addicted to that chaos and unpredictability. Like, what if I don't want to know what's going on tomorrow? Because when you're on the streets and you're ripping and running and you have no idea what's going to happen 5 minutes from now, much less tomorrow.
So in a weird sense, you're in like a heightened state of like you're very much alive when you're in that kind of reactionary environment versus being, more of a homebody. It's mundane, it's predictable, it's not exciting per se. It's kind of what you're saying.
Right. Like, I mean, this, for all the bad stuff that I can say about drugs, one of the best things about them is you are never, ever bored.
I guess it's one way to look at it, huh?
I mean, I'm just being realistic.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good, yep.
I wouldn't do drugs if there wasn't something I didn't like about them.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. Of course. That makes sense. There has to be an appeal there, or people wouldn't do them at all, would they?
Right, exactly.
So, wow. So, okay, so we're talking about, where are we at now? We're up to 8 treatment centers. You work a full-time job now. You have your own place.
Yep.
But I guess the point I was making with you was that you're up to number 8. So there's no magic number for how many times people may have to go through treatment or different types of rehab. They got to do it until they're either dead or they break the habit or the addiction, right? I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to. You can't classify this and say, well, we've given them too much help or not enough help. That would be easy, but you can't just say, oh, it's already too much, sucks to be you, because you don't know which time it's going to work.
I just briefly go over a couple people that I've met in the time that I've been in recovery.
Okay.
One guy that I was at my first treatment center with, he was in his 30s. He'd picked up meth like a year before and got completely out of control with it. He got arrested. He got put on drug court, which is basically really, really strict probation, that if you meet all the terms, they drop the charges. That's the best way to put it. He went through drug court. He is, judging by his Facebook profile at least, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'm a pretty good judge. His pictures, he looks healthy, like he's not on meth. He's completely got his life back. I know one guy was one of my counselors when I was at treatment, that he would routinely say he had been to 27 different treatment centers.
Wow.
From all around the country, from California to Florida, and he landed in Arkansas and went to one of the related treatment centers to the one I was at, and that's where recovery stuck with him, and that's where he stuck. I know a guy that I just knew from NA. I don't know how many treatment centers he's been at, but he was first sentenced to prison when he was 16 years old. He's in his late 50s now, between 16 and I think he's 58. Said he spent 3 years on the outside.
Wow.
He spent 3 years of his life not incarcerated. And the previous, I guess this was about a year and a half ago that he said this. It's been about 5 years now. But the vast majority of that time has been this last release when it really stuck with him. That he needed to do something different. And it took him until he was almost 60 years old.
So you don't know. You don't know, do you? You don't know what's going to be the catalyst or the thing that's going to help somebody stick, or because it's different for everyone.
Right.
Oh.
There's just no telling. Everybody is different. You know, some people are going to get it on the first time. Some people are going to get it on the second. For me, it took 8. Hell, it's 8 so far.
8 so far.
Maybe next year I fuck up and I'll need to go to 9. You know, I don't know. I can't predict the future. I know I'm doing okay right now.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what I'm going to be like tomorrow.
That's scary.
Yeah, I can't tell you about next week. Just on a day-to-day level, I woke up this morning. I have not gotten high. Hopefully, I don't get high before I go to bed tonight.
So small victories, right? They say one step at a time kind of thing.
One day at a time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we've been doing this here for over 2 hours, right? And I would like to give you this opportunity, man. If you could talk to somebody, if you could go back and talk to yourself back, before this all started, right? What would you tell yourself now? What would that conversation be? I mean, it's kind of a deep subject, I know, but I mean,
worthwhile human being. I would tell myself I was worthwhile. People loved me. There were people out there that had felt the exact same way I was feeling. There were people out there that felt that would be willing to talk to me about it. But I needed to open up and talk to them. That's what it boils down to. Is, for me at least, just from shit in my past, I became unwilling to talk to anybody about my problems.
right.
Every problem I had, I 100% internalized. And that ate away at me. So if I had to tell myself something that I think would keep me off this path, it would be just open up to people. Don't be afraid. Everybody has fucked up in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
It might not be the exact ways that I've fucked up. Their past might not be the exact same as my past. But because of the way they fucked up, they'll be able to understand my fuck up.
Right. So it was a self-worth thing then.
Right. And that goes to, and I promised I would talk about it earlier, and I never really did, the nature versus nurture of that genetic component of it. A lot of my addiction issues, just from talking with therapists and things like that over the years, stem from my experiences with my mother. She was not around when I was growing up.
Yep.
Now, that's when we get into that nature versus nurture debate. Am I an addict because my mother was an addict? Am I an addict because she gave me that genetic predisposition? Or am I an addict because I grew up without my mother? Am I an addict because my mother abandoned me as a young child and that left emotional scars?
Or is it both?
Is it one? Is it the other? Or is it both?
Right.
And they've done. It's impossible. At least I'm very good at analyzing and trying to look at situations. I can't think of any way that it's possible to get an accurate, objective study on that. That they've done studies on children who were adopted that went completely different ways from the way their parents went, or children who were adopted that ended up being drug addicts just like their parents. Now, was it that genetic predisposition, or was it because they were adopted, and the kids who were adopted have a higher chance of that kind of thing? I really wish I knew the answer. I really wish that I could tell you.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer to that one.
Yeah, it's hard to divide the solution at that point, isn't it? Because which is it? Who knows? But the net effect is still the same in that case. Negative net effect that the person becomes an addict. You know.
Right. For whatever reasons, whatever happened to me, I became the person that I am. And, honestly, even though I've done a lot of really bad shit, I've done a lot of stuff that I don't really ever want to talk with anybody about. Stuff that you knowingly would not believe I had done. I still think of myself today as a better person than I was before I ever picked up heroin. I think my experiences with addiction have caused me to be a better person. They've caused my eyes to open wider.
Yep.
They've caused me to be more open-minded to the world around me, to the plight of other humans.
Well, experiences, right, are that way. They're just experiences, and you sort of get to decide what those experiences are going to be for you, whether they're going to be a lesson or not, right? You have to decide what you're going to take from it ultimately. So bad things that happen to us are bad and can precipitate bad behavior if that's the way we choose, I suppose, to react to it. But at some point when we get clarity, we can also look at those same bad experiences and go, I probably shouldn't do that. Like we'll learn something from it. And you're I think what you're saying now is you're sort of on that side of it, right? You're starting to be more introspective and retrospective and looking back at these things and going, it sucked, but I did learn a lot about myself from it. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the core aspects of recovery, because obviously there's the 12-step system that all these fellowships work. And really the core meaning of that 12-step program is to really figure out who you are and look at all the good you've done, look at all the bad you've done, look at the problems that you have, look at the ways that you might fix the problems you have. Take responsibility for your own shit.
Right.
Basically, and the people who are able to do that and really look and make honest decisions about that are the ones that are able to recover. It's the people that don't want to look at the bad shit they've done. They're too scared to look at that bad shit that they've done that it causes them to fall right back into it.
So you gotta rip it open. You gotta rip it open and really just look at it all, don't you?
Yep.
You can't. So part of that process has to be that reconciling all of that into the column of being life experiences that I'm gonna learn something from, not life experiences that define me necessarily anymore. Right? Like you got to make that separation.
The fourth step of NA and AA is we've made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And different fellowships handle it differently. AA, honestly, what they do in AA is they go back to your very earliest memory and they you're supposed to write down literally everything that you can remember about your life. Starting from your first memory ever to, the first time you remember getting spanked, to the first time you remember really being happy, and just try to remember everything in your entire life that you can remember. NA is a little bit more forgiving, but they ask you, there's probably a 150-page notebook full of questions that asks you. And each question you're supposed to fill up anywhere from half a page to a page or more. The fourth-step section of that book has probably 200 questions that ask some of the most depressing, painful questions you could possibly imagine. But they're designed to cause you to really look at who you've been, and not only that, but who you want to be.
So there's got to be a goal. There's got to be, right, because otherwise you're just stagnant, right? You're not driving toward anything specific.
If you're not moving forward, you're moving backward.
Right. If you're not swimming, you're drowning, kind of idea. That makes sense.
Right.
That does make sense. Well, man, look, I think we're up to, like 165 minutes here on the recording. And I got to be honest, man, I get the sense from you that we could probably talk about multiple facets of this issue. Today, we kind of really just covered, some very, I would say, you specifically, obviously, and some really high level stuff here. But I'm willing to bet that we could probably do another part on things like the criminal justice system and things like this, and your experiences down that road, and the positives and the negatives and things like that. Would you be interested in doing another podcast at some point, and we'll parse this out into some more specific type of topics? Is that something that interests you?
Yeah, we could do that.
I would love that, man, because, look, I learned a ton from this, and I'm hoping that anybody that's listening to this learns a ton from it. Man, and I asked you a really tough question, Nick, and I really appreciate, because, man, I think you really came through here with exactly what I was looking for. I really wanted a completely sort of unbiased, hard look at this issue from somebody that, number one, you're on a good pace right now. You've been sober for a while, it sounds like. And you're kind of looking back at this and would give us the truth, like what is it, the gritty details of this? What does it actually look like? Because a lot of what I knew before I had this conversation with you was sort of sanitized. And I didn't think that it was, as most things are, they're not what you're told they are. Someone that's going through something is having a completely different experience than what you think you're seeing. And that's kind of what I wanted to get out of this from you. Is there anything else like to this topic, that you would like to sort of expound on or anything here as we kind of wrap up at the end here? Or is there anything that you would specifically like to say to anybody that might be listening, that may be dealing with a loved one or themselves dealing with addiction? What is there anything in there that you would want to recap on or expound on?
Well, the big thing is never lose faith, because addicts tend to lose faith in themselves. In fact, the main reason they do drugs, I think, is because they have no faith in themselves to ever get better. I know for a lot of me, the only thing that kept me from getting high was the fact that I had people that the only thing they expected of me was to not get high. And at the same time, if a loved one is out there struggling, you have to be tough. I can say probably the only reason that I am still alive right now is because my father kicked me out of his house. If he'd continued to enable me and make a way for me to get high without consequences, I was on the road to death pretty shortly. So be tough, but let them be, love them. I mean, a lot of time we feel that because of the stuff we've done, because of the people we've hurt, we are unworthy of love. Just let them know that's not the case,
That goes back to those emotional hooks again, being able to have something to strive for. And if it can't be yourself, can it be a loved one or somebody else kind of thing, right?
Right. I mean, they always say you can only get sober for yourself. I don't necessarily agree with that. I can only stay sober for myself. But I can get clean because I know my cat hasn't been fed. I can get clean because I know fiance expects it of me. I can get clean for any reason. I can use any excuse to get clean if I really want to get clean. But I'm not going to stay clean unless I want to.
Yeah. Wow, it's powerful, man. It's profound. Makes sense. Well, man, listen, I really appreciate you doing this with me, bud. I think we covered a lot of topics, and I think you really clarified a lot of stuff. At least, obviously this is all from your perspective and from your experiences, and everybody else's experience is going to be different. But I appreciate it. I would look forward to, I think we should do this again. I'm glad to hear that you're up for doing that. But other than that, bud, if you got anything else you'd like to cover, I think we should wrap it up here at about 170 plus minutes, and look forward to doing this again with you really soon.
Okay, sounds good. I will. I'll try to think of some things and see what I can put together.
Sounds good, buddy. All right, so guys, that's been Nick Furno. We've been talking about addiction here today. First-person perspective on the subject from somebody that's been through it. If you got any subjects you'd like me to cover, please feel free to comment on the page. But other than that, thanks, Nick, and we'll talk to everybody soon.